Hello, hello. Right, we are live. Come on in, you lovely folks. Come on in. You'll have to forgive the one-handed sound of typing. Anya is just setting up over on her end. She was unfortunately stung by that worst of office crimes. Someone who keeps the meeting room longer than they should, even though someone else has booked it. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. Compliment Cat burst the door, followed by some numbers and J-Post. What ho, friends! J-Post with the what ho mid-sentence. Cut over! Avach! Hello! Wraith! Lovely to see you. What ho, friends! As you all know, you've got about 10 minutes before we do proper introductions and get into the questions. So if you don't have a cup of tea, now's the time to brew it. We're going to have Anya from Kickstarter on a show very shortly. So get yourself heckin' ready, my friends, because we've got a lot going down. If you've got any questions about crowdfunding, any questions about Kickstarter, but specifically the video game section, so apart from some snide jokes, we're not going to be talking about the potato salad. Or we're also not going to mention the fact that Will would have started a Kickstarter to destroy the sun this year, but he couldn't because of tax reasons. So yes, Nivalis, the Prolo out of the deluge, Dorchus, Nivalis! What ho, friends! Oh, Nivalis with hello! And be right back, I get some dinner. Wraith's like, literally just made myself a cuppa, sat down, and a notification popped. Perfect timing. Wraith, that's some smooth operator right there. I'm just informed. Anya's apologising that she's running a little bit late, just saying sorry for the hold. I'm like, no worry. I'm working the crowd, yo. Hi, I'm going to be your warm-up act for this evening. I just flew in here, and boy, is my arm tired. Some numbers being like, so definitely 100% mention that you want to kickstart destroying the sun. Got it. That was a good night. That was a very good night. I think we came up on that on the way back from the boat, and we were trying to come up with the nonsense logic that would be required to kill the sun. So just silly enough that it would get a laugh, but not sensible enough that people would think I'd actually have to deliver killing the sun. Alpha Deluge says, we can't ask about the potato salad, but what about the potential Caesar salad? Wait, was there a Caesar salad follow-up? Numbers saying, boo, crowdfunder Death Star! I mean, eventually, you've got to work up to these things. You know, you've got to have your first Kickstarter is going to be sensibly budgeted. But yeah, so I guess if you haven't heard of it, back in the early days of Kickstarter, one bloke did a Kickstarter to make a potato salad, ended up making a stupid amount of money. It was just during that like halcyon summer when Kickstarter was everywhere and was doing nothing but producing some good stuff. Oh, here we go. Hello! Wow, you have a swanky setup.
Oh, sorry, I had my volume turned off.
It's alright, it's alright. I'm just doing a wee bit of mixing over here.
Oh, cool.
Can you go to the settings?
So, ladies and gentlemen in chat, and individuals of all persuasions, you've still got 6 or 7 minutes before we kick off proper. So we're going to fiddle-faddle around with the setup, make it look good. Producing the show with one hand is very difficult. And when you see Anna's setup, you're going to be like, hey, Will, how come you still run this... how can you still run this shoddy operation? Here we go. No. Oh, I got it. How's it going with your good self, Anna? Anya, sorry, God. Haha!
But if you'd rather not, that's fine, actually. I mean, I don't want to cause too much of a fuss.
Okay. So we have the face of Anya, but lamentably not the voice. Oh, they got a real... Have you seen this setup? It's awesome! How do I get me one of those? Slow down, you kids, says...
racism. But most of all, we're so terribly...
Oh, people discussing the difference between GoFundMe and Kickstarter. I believe GoFundMe is more of... you know what? I actually haven't looked into GoFundMe's actual model. I've seen a lot of people use it for medical support and for personal projects like, I want to go here, please GoFund me. Whereas Kickstarter's more kind of the, here is a thing that we are going to do. Right, also, I wanted to say, slow down, you kids! What? Oh, friend, I apologise, I didn't say hello. So, we've got an Anna, however, they are exceedingly quiet. Whoa, we are super close! I don't know if you can hear us, Anya, and I keep destroying your name, and I'm incredibly sorry. We do not, unfortunately, get a U. Anya gestures dramatically to off-camera. Sadly, Canny is... yeah. Jumping back into chat, Stooge, what-ho! DJ Alternative, what-ho! Number says the brother wants to pay off their student loans. That's definitely GoFundMe. Yes, that for sure. I believe one of Kickstarter's rules is having a deliverable. Okay, so we've got Anya to full volume. Do you have to disable stream?
No.
Oh, old! Christ in a handbag, hello.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
I can indeed, hello.
Okay, sorry, we didn't have the... We're good at games, that's about it.
Hey, it's like I said, what I like to do on this show is spend like 10 minutes just kind of waffling on before kickoff, because it allows us to have like a little conversation beforehand, and anyone who's running late doesn't miss out on all the good stuff.
No worries. This is so funny, like, this room is really dark, and it's making me, at least in my camera, I think the reflection off of my glasses is making it look like I have a unibrow.
Oh yeah!
Which is kind of fun.
As someone who has to do battle against an actual unibrow, I know the fear is real. The fear is real.
Well, I was nervous because I noticed about an hour or two ago, so it's really humid here in New York City.
Oh, you're in NYC. Way cool.
I'm in New York, yeah. We're Kickstarter's based in Brooklyn, and it's like we live in Texas right now. Like, it's just so hot, and there's just nothing we can do. And I noticed that there's no way you're gonna. Well, you can kind of see it. I got bit by a mosquito right on my face.
Heck.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
I've been covered in mosquito bites this entire summer, and so I've just sort of succumbed to the fact that I think now New York City has become the new Texas. So
I don't want to start off the show with controversial opinions, but I have been introduced to the term West Coast, Best Coast, and just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from the West Coast, so I have a lot of opinions about both West and East Coast.
I feel we could fill a show with that entirely.
I don't disagree.
But yeah, if you want to grab water or tea or anything, you've still got time. I'm just doing hellos and intros to everybody because I've not said hello to Dragsvart, Arden, or there's someone else I missed. Stooge. If I didn't say hello, Stooge, what-ho, friends? Come on in. Ooh, not only that, Meebot did its job. Bloody hell. Yeah, and tweets have been unleashed into the world. What have I completely forgotten to do?
Yikes, that's scary.
People don't think I know what I'm doing.
Well, they're going to think I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing.
Wait, if you don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what I'm doing, then who's driving the plane?
I have no idea.
Oh, I'm sorry. I inflict that joke upon the viewers here almost daily.
You know what? I feel like I'm a part of something now, and that's all I really want in my life. So.
But yeah, we'll do proper intros in just a second. But I want to say off the bat, like, thank you for coming on. It's sincerely appreciated, and it's been a weird week. Let me tell you. I currently have this gigantic fucking infinity gauntlet strapped to my hands till next Thursday because I'm a stupid. But I should point out that the only person who was injured in said night out was me. So
Oh, that makes the story even more interesting.
Okay, I've told everyone's had to hear this, so I might as well tell it one more time. It was a very, very good night. Like a drink in one part of town turns into a drink in another part of town, turns into an impromptu street party with people I had just met. And listening to my headphones, boogieing on the way back, I saw a low-hanging branch, and I decided that I was gonna, do that kind of like, go ahead and jump, like jump punch in time with the music.
Pointer Sisters, yeah.
Did not see the stop sign behind it.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's the dumbest.
No, I mean, hey, we've all been there. It's okay. I fall completely sober, just like standing.
That takes effort.
It's one of the few talents I have in life.
Oh, lordy. Also, the scary thing that the last guest I had on the show was saying is that this is only like week 4 since PAX, and it feels like it has been 20 years.
It really does. It really does. And then that combined with just like the general news cycle. Whew,
Yeah.
I
kind of want to file that one under a how about no situation.
Yeah, it's totally fair. I saw a tweet somewhere, someone was like, today's been 62 years long, and I was like, yeah, that feels right.
Time truncation is real. So, are you able to see the lovely folks in chat?
I am not. How do I do that?
Let me send you the link, and then you can mute my sorry self, but you'll be able to see the chat. Oh, no, that is not what I asked you for. One-handed is not optimal.
Oh no.
Still, it is the destiny of all Sith to be betrayed by everything, including their browser tabs. You have betrayed me for the last time, Crow. I will find you and I will destroy.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So click on this.
Oh no, that's a little bit not quite.
I'm gonna have to mute this. I'm gonna assume.
Yeah.
Mute that. Cool.
Okay, why? Okay, but Discord, why though?
But Discord, why though?
Okay, but Discord, why though? Doing this all left-handed is incredibly difficult. Like.
So you broke your right hand and you're right-handed.
Yup.
Wow.
I am a proper stupid on this one. Okay.
No, you're totally fine. Oh my gosh.
No, do the full screen thing. No, don't do the 2 people thing. It's being an ass. It's being an utter ass. We'll just deal with that for a second because I don't want to eat any more of anyone else's time. So I do apologise, one and all. I do apologise. But if you see any cracking questions that pop up in chat that you'd like to jump onto, usually I do this in the preamble, but I guess so that everyone also watching knows. I will, we'll be talking a lot about like the fluffy ideals of video games and Kickstarter and things like that. But we're also going to get into some of the serious questions. If there's anything that you can't talk about that's not cool, you are absolutely allowed to say so because, NDAs and professionalism is a real thing. But also, if there's any questions you see in chat that you'd like to pick out, just read out the question first so everybody knows what you're saying. But yeah, absolutely feel free to get stuck into it.
Okay,
right.
Cool.
If I faff with any more stuff, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. Wait, no, hang on! God darn it! That was the point when things weren't supposed to be faffed with. I mean, hello, I'm a professional host. How are you?
This is great. I've never been more entertained.
Well, so long as it's entertaining. Right.
I mean, for what it's worth, I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you kindly. Thank you kindly. Right. Without further ado, without further drama or nonsense, I would like to allow my guests to introduce their good selves. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, my name is Anya Combs. I'm the senior games outreach person at Kickstarter. I've been in games 10 years, believe it or not. Yeah, long time. So I've had sort of a weird, interesting path into games. I like to say that I'm a game industry vet who's never actually made a game.
Well, as someone who's done as someone with a similar background, I'd love to hear your tale. Let's give people a basis for the story so far.
Sure. So I have no like educational background in games. Yeah, so which I think is like pretty common, quite honestly. I think these like game design schools are like still pretty recent, pretty new. So I studied music in school. That's what I wanted to do.
Sorry if I laugh. It's because I studied drama.
Oh,
I'm seeing some parallels. But please continue. I do apologise.
yeah, I like this movement with the cast. It's kind of fun.
People want me to put googly eyes on it, and I don't want to because it would be awesome. I'm not against it, but when I rotate it, it goes, oh, that's quite sore. And I'd end up using it like a Muppet puppet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, don't rotate it then.
It hurts when I do that. Well, stop doing it then.
Don't do it. So I studied music. I actually wasn't allowed to play video games. They were banned in my house. We could play like, family tabletop games and things like that. The only console I was allowed to have was an Atari.
Ooh.
And even then it was sort of restrictive as to like what I could and couldn't play on it. So I really I loved the idea of video games. I always wanted to play video games, but they were not allowed. And so I distinctly remember begging my parents all I wanted to do was play Mario. I remember going to a friend's house and playing Mario, and they were like, it's not educational. So they got me this Mario typing game that they thought would suffice for Mario. And I was like, this game sucks.
God, I remember those.
Yeah. So I played a lot of it. Oh yeah, they're fine. They're fine. I shouldn't say they suck. They're fine. It did make me a decent typer, but
And shout out to Typing in the Dead for being stupendously brilliant.
Yeah, and there's actually like a lot of really cool Flash games that are typing games that I ended up. I think a lot of it was just like there wasn't that adrenaline associated with it. So
yeah. So as we all know, limiting and severely limiting your children's access to a thing is usually the fastest way to make them really clamour for it.
Yeah.
So this was your driving force into games as a passion. But how did you come into games as a profession?
Yeah, as a profession. So like I said, I studied music. I thought that's what I would do, and I actually do that on the side here in New York, which is really great. But I was working in music in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this industry is horrible. It's so misogynistic. I'll go try to get a job in games. As you do.
Yeah.
So this job posting kind of popped up when I was looking for new jobs to work for addictinggames.com, sort of just like looking for cool Flash games and playing cool Flash games. And I was like, I play Flash games sometimes. I could probably do this.
Okay. If you don't mind my asking, what was the time frame of that? I'm just mentally trying to put it in terms of between Newgrounds, Congregate, and then the move towards like Facebook and browser. Like when was
that was 2008.
Okay, so post the rise of Newgrounds, but like just on the cusp of kind of mobile and browser and social media.
Yeah, it was about 2 years before mobile really took over, 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So I got this like weird, cool, amazing, super strange job at addictinggames.com where I just like played a ton of Flash games and really got involved in that community, and like kind of fell in love with Flash games at least.
Hells yeah. Actually, I'm proud to say that one of my first guests on the show was actually Stamper, who did loads of stuff on Newgrounds, and we got to chat a lot about that era, that kind of wild west of creativity that the Flashgrounds era kind of sprung. And all the lovely people in chat have had to listen to me rant passionately about that era and what it brought us. So that's super cool to hear.
Yeah, it was kind of a wild west, and it was super strange and really great. And as someone who was like just I was like 25 years old and like knew a very limited amount of games, about games, and then just kind of got thrown into it and was like, this is fascinating. And I saw a lot of like really deep parallels between games and music. And the thing that was always interesting to me as someone who like did not want to make a game, and I still truthfully like don't really have an interest in making games.
Yeah.
the thing that I'm interested in more than anything else is the people behind the games, like the artists, the creators. I want to work with them in some capacity, whether it's like helping them find funding through things like Kickstarter, or like pairing them up with other interesting people. Like, hey, you're like, let's say that you're a great programmer and you're a great coder, but you're maybe lacking in art. What artists do I know that I can pair you up with, or vice versa, and stuff like that. So that was always like the interesting part to me. So I noticed someone in chat said Addicting Games was great before Nickelodeon Viacom bought them. So I started working there right after Viacom bought them.
Ooh.
And so I got to kind of see that whole process happen, and then see this sort of like Nickelodeon takeover, which was very interesting. And it wasn't necessarily slow, and it wasn't necessarily fast, but it did get to a point where it was like, it was a bit of a slow takeover. And then it was like, we woke up one morning and they were like, Nickelodeon's taking over, deal with it. And we were like, okay.
Wow.
So it was really kind of interesting.
Very quickly, I just want to say good morning to Mr. Ghost, Alleged Man. I don't think I said one to DJ or Vanderbeest. So what, old friends, come on in. Okay, because I think I butchered your name several times in the intro while we were doing the. How do I pronounce your name when introducing?
So it's Anya. It's like Anya without the T. Yeah.
I double guessed myself into some very weird pronunciations, so I'm incredibly sorry. But it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce you one and all to Anya, who is Video Games Outreach over at Kickstarter. So, we getting into the weeds today. It's going to be good.
Yeah.
So ready. I mean, professional host, yes. Yes, hello. Nickelodeon had taken over. You were telling me.
Nickelodeon had taken over. I see that Mr. Ghost has a question. Are there any public stats on failed versus successful Kickstarters? Yes. I think it's ICO Partners. Thomas Bedeau does an incredible roundup every year about Kickstarter, and he breaks everything down from video games to tabletop games. So that he probably is the best resource to kind of see failed versus successful. And I see Slow Down You Kids says no such thing as a failed Kickstarter. Aww. Which is sort of a quote of mine.
Oh, wait, cool.
Or not mine, all of us really here on the games team. So I don't believe that there's such thing as a failed Kickstarter.
Well, so one of the things that I wanted to do today was, Mr. Ghost's question is stonking, and I don't mean to put a pin in it, but Kickstarter is evolving as fast as video games is evolving, and there is not a one-size-fits-all for all projects that go into Kickstarter. A video game Kickstarter is madly different than a board game or a comic book in terms of like the success-fail rate, in terms of what users are looking for, but also in 2018, what a Kickstarter is to video games is incredibly different from like the heyday. So I thought we'd chat a little bit back and forth about like how Kickstarter's gotten to how it is in 2018, and then get really into the weeds, because there was a time when some fun retro graphics and a catchy title was all one needed for a very successful Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And lest we forget, Elite Dangerous fell on its face with its first Kickstarter, relaunched it, and then I think they did a bit alright. They did a bit good. They got a couple of quid, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So,
I think there's a lot to unpack there. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is, no two Kickstarters are the same. That's just like the reality of it.
Yeah.
There's also a bit of like, it doesn't cost $30,000 to make a game. That's just not possible.
Yeah.
It's just not a reality. When you're seeing projects on Kickstarter for video games that are like $30,000 funding goal, $50,000 funding goal, these sort of like smaller amounts, that's mostly to finish the game. And that's kind of where we're at in terms of games on Kickstarter, right? So when we're talking about like the evolution of games on Kickstarter, where you could just have like maybe just like half of a GDD or even a quarter of a GDD and like a picture, that was enough, and that's totally fine. And the thing is, the platform has sort of evolved into people saying, we're looking for more. We want to make sure that you're going to have something that is you're going to come out with. And that's not because people like, quote, don't come out with Kickstarters. The number of games that do fund but don't come out is extremely small, despite what you may hear from the press. It's just something that we have to deal with a lot.
And
but
also, just articulating on that point is that a lot of the failed Kickstarters have been under very, very high scrutiny. Now, I'm going to pick on Mighty Number 9 as our example of the bad, because I got a bone to pick with that one.
That's totally fine.
Anime fan prom night. Oh, I'm so mad still. But it did a bad. It undermined a lot of people's confidence in Kickstarters, and it had all the materials it needed to go to market. And because it was under such scrutiny, because it was on such focus, it kind of, much like the Unity games are cheap, it created the Kickstarter games don't get launched, a false narrative. And, Mighty Number 9 did eventually launch, and I wish it hadn't. I wish it had been the Half-Life 3 of Kickstarter games. I could have imagined a beautiful game and been happy. Sorry, it turns into Will's personal bias, the stream.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, here's the reality too is like, there's a little bit of pushback that I kind of give on people, just in the sense of like, games at the end of the day are art and they're subjective. And the game came out and people didn't like it. And that to me is, it sucks, but also it's okay. It means you didn't like a piece of art.
That is a very good way of thinking about it, and considering my rhetoric, I really should have thought about it in that regard sooner.
I mean, I think it's challenging, right? Because I think that the other side of it is like, when we are talking about art and when we are talking about creative processes, like, people get emotionally invested. And so what I see when people are completely justified in being upset in something like a Mighty Number 9 not living up to their expectations, it's not really it's not coming from a very analytical standpoint, which is completely okay. It's coming from the standpoint of, I felt emotionally invested in this thing that means a lot to me, and it didn't meet my expectations, and I'm upset about it. And that's totally fine. But there is a little bit of reality check there where it's like, well, you kind of do have to take a step back and say, my emotions are driving my decision, and my emotions are driving how I feel about what this game has essentially come out as. Does that make sense?
No, it does, and it's a fair way of putting it. The funding element of Mighty Number 9 was incredibly successful. There was a large amount of failure behind the scenes, which I don't think we'll find out in its entirety for a long time. But the thing that the art was proposed, the art was funded, and the art was released, and high emotions and high expectations can lead to a big downfall, puts Alleged Man. Saucy Nacho. Hello, what, friend? Come on in. We're chatting with Anya about Kickstarters. Come on in, take a seat, get some tea.
Hello.
I mean,
So I think the other side of it too, though, is like, one of the things that I hate to say counter, but essentially counter, is as much as like that sucked, and I am not trying to take that away from anybody's like emotional gratification from any part of it. But the other side of it is there's also like so many really cool games that did come out, right?
Yeah.
So Hyper Light Drifter, Thimbleweed Park, Banner Saga, like there's incredible games that do end up coming out on Kickstarter. And I think sometimes what ends up happening, and I completely understand why this happens. So it's similar, like if let's say you put something out in the world and you get comments back, right? So out of 100 comments, if 99 comments are all positive and there's one negative comment, you're going to focus on that negative comment.
That's a good point.
And I think sometimes that's kind of what ends up happening with a lot of Kickstarter games, is it's like, well, there's 100 Kickstarter releases and 99 of them are great, but one of them was for whatever reason just a colossal like failure in whatever terms that means.
Indeed.
Everyone's going to focus on that. And I get it. Trust me.
Abyssal Wolfen added an additional element to that, which I think is really, again, something which is worth discussing. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to use Mighty Number 9 as a punching bag, because it's got the full smorgasbord of bits to hit. But Abyssal Wolfen was saying that the thing is, Mighty Number 9 would have been bad even if it wasn't a Kickstarter project. If you think about the pedigree of developer involved, the fact that it was that for those that don't know, the Mega Man series has always had a troubled relationship with Capcom. It's better in the last few years, but Capcom kept pushing the Mega Man franchise into very weird directions, and then cancelling projects because they weren't selling. So the user base wanted X. They were being given Y repeatedly, and when Y stopped selling, they were like, "Oh well, Mega Man doesn't sell." So this was meant to be the creator of Mega Man breaking free of his shackles to make the game he was always going to. And I mean, I'm not saying Daikatana, but I'm saying that had Mighty Number 9 been funded through traditional publisher means and released in the same state, we would have seen the same amount of negative feedback. What's interesting is that, like lightning sparking the ground, a lot of that negativity didn't hit the project as much as it hit the funding method, and I find that very interesting. And unfair, but I find it interesting.
I'm completely with you. I think it's also like there is something to be said, and I do think like as a not just as like a Kickstarter person, but also just like as a fan of games, I think it's worth sort of acknowledging like when you put your money into something, especially like a Kickstarter project, it's not just monetary value, it is an emotional value that you're putting in there. You're saying, I believe in this project with you, I want to be a part of this with you.
Yes.
So there has a little bit more meaning into it. And I completely get that, and I think a lot of the pushback, I'll say, not hate, but pushback that Mighty Number 9 received was more of that sort of emotional value that's attached to it, much more than sort of the monetary, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times, like, I back a ton of Kickstarter projects, and sometimes I even forget projects that I've backed, and suddenly stuff shows up in the mail, and I'm like, oh yeah, I super backed that project.
It's kind of like those random grab boxes, but way better.
Yeah. So and so when you have that emotional attachment to it again, like the come down and the fall and the high from that, the crashing of that high is going to be so much more impactful.
What I would say is, I mean, I guess I do have an axe to grind with Mighty Number 9 because I was very emotionally invested in that one. But what I want to do is I want to talk about the Halcyon Summer, and then I want to talk about 2018 and the now, because let us bask in the warmth of the beautiful summer. It was what, 2013, 2014?
2015 was the crazy summer.
Yeah, it was a mythical year, one and all. Projects that could only have been dreamed of were going up on Kickstarter and being fully funded. And for people, I mean, at the time I was still in AAA, so I'm in this huge dev operation. I'm watching the slow speed of the battleship to create new and innovative projects. And naming no names, but I had a conversation with a business individual about wanting to do a space sim game, want to do something open and freeform, and they repeated to me the classic rhetoric of space games don't sell.
Right.
They were very, very wrong. Like 8 kinds of wrong. And
I still hear that. I still hear space games don't sell.
No, it's just... So, were you... I mean, because we didn't manage to finish your entire story, so when did you join Kickstarter? Sorry. And did you get to be a part of that Halcyon Summer?
No, so I started at Kickstarter in January of 2016. So I was actually hired on partially because of the the madness of 2015. Is there was one person on the games team here running everything.
Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah, and so...
Are they still with us?
Yes. He is tired all the time, as am I. We are the most tired team here, I think. And so that wasn't just video games. That was also the behemoth that is tabletop.
Yes.
And he's a tabletop games creator. So it's wild.
Oh,
so I was brought on. And since then, tabletop has boomed even bigger.
Yeah. Which
is crazy. And so I was brought on mostly because of my background in digital and video games. But since being part of Kickstarter, and my third year will be January of 2019, which is exciting. Yay. I've taken on a lot of responsibilities from the board game community too, which is really interesting. And the thing is, like, there's a lot of crossover there, not just from like the sort of emotional attachment that I talk about a lot with video games, but also just like the creativity and the anxieties and the release schedules, and like there's so much crossover between the two. It's Kickstarter sort of is built perfectly for something like a tabletop game where you're like, well, I've done the research, I've done the numbers, I need X amount, and this is what I need. Video games are just inherently a little bit more difficult, right?
There is an art and craft into them, and sometimes that can add a large amount of complications. And it's interesting because from the outside, it doesn't appear that board games had the same kind of post-Golden Age pushback that video games had. So they're still enjoying their halcyon summer, so to speak. Oh, I just lost everybody. There we go. And one thing that I was involved with a lot was indie comics for a while. I'm loud. I volunteered my time at comic conventions to help sell people's comics. It was fun.
Nice.
But one thing that was really interesting was that comics is also seeing the same as board games. Like, comic goes up, it says it'll cost this much to make. Here's when we can deliver, and it's rare for these kinds of comics and board games projects to fail outright. Like, there's got to be something wrong with it. So, video games is of the. Sorry, I'm butchering my point like a madman. Of the trifecta of kind of nerd Kickstarter elements, board games, comics, and video games. Video games of the three seems to be the one that has the weird reputation. But we still had that. We had that lovely summer where everyone was making loads. And how did we get to that here in 2018?
Well, I think one of the things that's happening is those games are just now coming out. You know, like it takes a long time for games to be made. So part of it is that some of those games are just now starting to come out. The other side of it is I think people saw like it costs a lot of money to fund video games.
Yes.
There's so many different reasons as to why like things are a little bit in flux and a little bit strange right now. But the thing is, like, the Kickstarter video game community, it really exists for a lot of these like fun, weird, niche like indie games. So indie games in particular, some of the smaller indie games, that's really kind of like where Kickstarter excels and exists. A lot of those games also are, they're being published by big publishers, right? So whether that's I know Adult Swim has published a number of games. Team 17 has published a number of games. I don't know if Devolver has published any, but I know that they back games, and I know that they will call out games on Twitter, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Tim Schafer tweets about stuff all the time for Kickstarter, which is really exciting.
Well,
so
Tim's company was essentially saved by Kickstarter, so
yeah.
I mean, let's not beat around the bush. He said so in interviews that, like, had it not been for oh my god, the point and click adventure, what was it called? Where is my brain?
Oh, Broken Age?
Thank you. If it wasn't for Broken Age, there wouldn't be Double Fine.
Yeah, and Double Fine still consistently is publishing a bunch of Kickstarter projects, which is really great. The biggest one for them, I think, this year will be Knights and Bikes.
Yes, okay, small tangent. Did you see the Knights and Bikes stand at PAX?
Yes.
It was so lovely. For those of you that didn't get a chance to see the photos or attend PAX, they made like a kid's bedroom stand, and like you went under the bunk bed to sit and play like it was so lovely.
Yeah. It's so funny. Moo from Knights and Bikes was telling me. So they're very, very small team, and he was saying that. What is that? Slow Down You Kids is now following.
Indeed, and Slow Down You Kids. Thank you for the follow, yo. Because I've had a broken...
I feel like...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I feel like I need to disclose. So Slow Down You Kids is actually my husband.
You could have let me just sneak under the radar there. It would have been fine.
Oh, well, you know.
Well, the follow is sincerely appreciated, though, because I've been dealing with Mr. Gauntlet Mole here, I haven't worked out. I might hit 1,000 followers today. That's a thing that could possibly happen.
Yay, that's exciting.
So I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I think I've got a box of like stuff I've been saving to give away, so we might have to crack into that. But that's another story. Also, my lot are all consistently joking of, is this the point where Will asks for a bunch of copies of the Dark Souls board game? For a start, I've already got my copies, so y'all got to sort yourselves out. I'm set.
So I don't know if we have a copy in the office. So the actual building of Kickstarter, which is really cool, is we're a gutted warehouse in Brooklyn. So there's a string of old pencil factories on Kent Street here in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And we are one of the pencil factories, one of the old pencil factories. So it's like 3 stories. It's a beautiful office. Anytime you're in New York City, come by. We're happy to give you a quick tour.
I would love to. I don't know when I'll be in New York next, but I will absolutely take you up on that one.
Absolutely, you're always welcome. But the games team has sort of decided. What does he say? Oh, Slow Down You Kid says they have a Beauty and the Beast style library full of board games. Yeah, exactly. So we have we have this beautiful library that the games team has essentially decided is our home, and so we work in the library. And there is a huge shelf of board games that are pretty much, if not all, Kickstarter projects, at least projects that people send us, which is really cool. So
also, DJ just pointed out. So you pushed the pencils out of the factory.
Something like that.
An alleged man being like, I want a sequel to Brutal Legend. Well, unfortunately, only you and 3 other people do, so... Sorry, that was mean and I apologise. It was a very expensive project that didn't sell nearly as well as it needed to. But there we go. All right.
Yeah. So to circle back into video games, I think the challenge is that it's not like this is a unique problem that's a Kickstarter issue, right? So there was that article that came out recently, I think it was like 2 days ago, about like why you shouldn't be an indie game developer.
Ugh, don't get me started on that one.
I know, and I had a lot of issues and feelings about it, and I think I saw a lot of people saying like, oh, it was Kickstarter's fault. Kickstarter's the reason that you can't be an indie game developer anymore. And I was like, really?
That's the point where you take your shoe off and you start throwing it at people on the internet.
Well, I was just like, that's a really lazy narrative.
Indeed, and like we've opened. Okay, we're doing it. All right, everyone, sit down. We're doing this. We're cracking into this because I've not been ranting about this article this week. But firstly, like Rami did a great presentation about this, like the indie apocalypse, like a couple years back, and it was real good. Alfred the Deluge. No, a shoe, not my shoe. Sorry, weird thing. We have a mystical sword called My Shoe. It's kind of glows blue. Came from Hellblade. It was a very strange time, so I have to specify. What I thought was really interesting is, I mean, Rami's talk was far more concise, and basically, like, the market has opened up. You know, it's the point of going from concept to hitting your stride, releasing in a niche and making an inordinate amount of money is over. Like, the indie bubble isn't there. But it has never been easier to take a game from concept to market. Yes, Steam really, really needs some curation and some better discoverability. And don't even get me started on like discovery by algorithms, because that's ranty McGingersville. But it's actually more viable now to go into indie games. You just have to be a grown-up about it. You've got a budget. You've got to, set yourself up in a place. You and your 5 mates can't open a San Diego or a San Francisco office on that fun little quirky concept of an indie platformer.
Well, but that's kind of the point, right? Like, I think the beauty of indie games is, like, you don't necessarily even need to live in the same country as your coworkers.
Yep. We've dealt with a lot of guests on here who work almost entirely remotely. One of our grand benefactors and supporters is Thor, who is making a game called Heartbound. They actually just did a Kickstarter for their adorable mascot. It's like a stuffed animal version of one of their characters. And they are all remote, and they dev via Twitch, so that's where they interact with their audience. And what would an office give them comparable to their current working operations? We met a team who work primarily out of South Africa, but their team is split worldwide, and even in the city where they're at, they're all working from different locations. They give us some real cool tips on how to operate as a... sorry, Will's on tangent mode. Hello.
No, it's fine. I mean, here's the other side of it too. Like, someone was saying, I thought that article had some good advice with a terrible, provocative title. I don't disagree with that. There is some decent advice in there, but I think, like, I say this a lot. If we're looking at the games industry, which is still like pretty new.
Yup.
Sorry, I was getting a thumbs up. If we're looking at the games industry, which is still like relatively new, and if we're looking at it from the perspective of it's gonna go the same way as the music industry, we are now at the place of the games industry where we were with the music industry in 1999, 2000, 2001, when Napster came out and basically said everybody can just download games, it's fine, or download music, it's fine for free. And then once people started realizing like, oh, you don't really need to pay for music. Where's the money actually going? Now the music industry is in such a confusing, strange place where artists can only make money through basically touring. Like they don't make a ton of money through things like Spotify and streaming. And it's just a huge mess. I suspect that games is basically going to go the exact same way, where nobody wants to necessarily be with like a major label. So people don't really want to sign with like a major publisher because really like what's the point? Yeah. And so there's a bunch of niche sort of music labels that are out there. And so it's kind of the same thing with like some of these niche indie publishers. So go with these niche indie publishers, like why not kind of go with them? So we've
seen a lot of success of those. If you sign with if you sign with a major publisher, there is a very good chance that you can, lose creative control. You can lose control of your IP. And one of the things that we know is that back catalog is the touring of video games. Like, it's not your day one sales. It's your game that keeps selling like 100 copies every week.
Yeah. And then on top of that too, like if we're talking about the publishing side of things and we're talking about, indie games, why are you making games? Right? Like, so that's a question that I think a lot of people kind of need to ask themselves, from the sense of like a lot of full-time musicians, people who are truly full-time, and I'm not talking about pop stars, I'm not talking about people that are like famous, I'm talking about people that
work
play
and grind,
music.
actual musicians.
Yeah. And so these people are not really working on their own music. I keep wanting to say games. They're not working on their own music. They're teaching. They have like private lessons that they teach people. Here in New York City, I have a lot of friends that are full-time musicians, and they go to these rich kids' houses upstate and they teach these kids privately. It's the same in games where you're like, well, I have to just kind of like pump out this mobile game because I know it'll get me some ad revenue, or it'll get me revenue, or just basically like pay for me to make my own game. So if you're making games under this guise of like, I'm going to be a millionaire because there's so much money in games, the money that's being made in games is in stuff like GTA. Yes.
And finding out that GTA is the most profitable entertainment property in existence is still mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I want to articulate off of that, which is more in agreement than anything else, is that where I was going back with the idea of we have to be grown-ups is just that. You've got to do a sensible business model. You've got to know what you're going into. Yeah. If you want to make a narrative adventure, you've got to look at narrative adventures and see how they're doing and plan accordingly, because you can't anticipate that you're going to be one of the breakaway successes. Here's an interesting one. So we did a breakdown a couple weeks ago on Pinstripe. And this is
Kickstarter project.
Yeah, successful Kickstarter, backed by content creators, and I mean, it hit all the beats that one would expect.
Yeah.
Still, its post-launch sales were very, very weak, to the point where the creator was very public about this.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that once you've been featured in Time magazine, you're expecting some hella big sales, but being grown-ups about the business side of this is survivability.
Well, here's the interesting thing about Thomas, the creator of Pinstripe. So he was working a full-time job while he was running his Kickstarter project. And because of the success of the Kickstarter project, which brought in additional opportunities, he was able to quit his job. And so he is now a full-time games creator. Does that mean that he is just focusing on his content 100% of the time? No, he's doing a ton of stuff. That's kind of the reality of working in game dev. Somebody said in the chat, if you want to be a millionaire, wait, where was that? I missed it. Oh, if you want to be a millionaire, you have to be an executive, followed by, if you're just looking to make a bunch of money, you are definitely better matched there are definitely better matched industries you could find yourself. And I think that's the reality. And all of this kind of circles back to what I was saying in the beginning, is that games at the end of the day are art. It is hard to make a living as an artist.
Yes.
I don't care what that is. I don't care if that's painting. I don't care if that's drawing. I don't care if that's music, film, dance, games. It is hard. That's just the reality of it. And I think there's a little bit of a crash that comes when you're like, I have this cool idea and I'm really excited about it, and you don't make $1 million from it. It's sort of a like, well, then what's the point? Well, that's a little bit of a conversation that you need to have with yourself. And that's something that I think just doesn't really get discussed enough. Does that make sense?
And I'm happy to talk about it. One of the interesting things has been... so I'm sorry to keep using Thor as an example, but he used his first project as essentially as a test the waters. They had enough capital to work on a project for, I believe it was like 14 months. So they set a chunk of that aside to create, I think it was Champions of Breakfast, which took them through the whole process of creating and releasing a title. This game wasn't designed to sell, it was designed to streamline the process so when they began, they'd know. Also, we spoke with a team, it's not Fireball. They made a title called Violet Swing. And they, they're a professional team, they make games, and their whole thing is we never spend more than 13 months on a title. Because they work out a nice, tight, small scope, they get it finished in 10, polished in 13, and get it out onto the market. And it's the background radiation of sales. I can't name any names in this one, but I do know teams that do work for hire to supplement between projects. So they'll work in a game, release it, and then once it's out, they'll do work for hire whilst they work out how that's selling and what's going on. They don't just sit on their thumbs and be like, oh boy, gee whiz, sure hope it sells a whole bunch of video games.
Yep.
And that's what irked me about that article, is it felt like someone from the outside being like, oh, you, don't quit your day job, oh, you're never going to make it. It felt mean-spirited, and it felt like the parents of old telling you, oh, you'll never make any money from selling video games. It's just, got to be grown-ups about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a reality.
So
I completely agree with you.
So doing a hop, skip, and a dance, I think this brings us very, very neatly onto welcome to 2018. The games industry's still fecking weird, but it's weird in a different way now.
Yes.
Kickstarter is not dead. Kickstarter is still a valid and viable mode, and I say this with the utmost respect because it has been proven false, but there was a period, especially like, I want to say like 2016, end of 2017, where companies were looking at Kickstarter as a way of raising awareness, not raising funding.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we spoke with the team behind Boyfriend Dungeon a couple weeks ago, and they had a stonkingly good Kickstarter.
Yes.
So, what is the Kickstarter landscape looking like in 2018?
Well, so we only have a couple months left in 2018, and I would.
Oh God, but there's only a few months left. Ah.
I know it's wild, right?
Oh.
I'm not prepared.
I'm not ready.
October is going. It's going to be my own personal sprint, and that's okay.
Yeah. I'm going to put the in November when it shows up. You know what I mean?
So we did our Luke, who's the other half of games here in New York. We have someone that works in Chicago, and we have someone that works in Germany. But here in New York, there's two of us that are full time.
Yeah.
We looked at the number of weekends that we worked, and it's something like 9, 10, or 11 weekends for the entire year. And so we were like, I guess we should take some time off. But. So if we're talking about games for the remainder of 2018, there are actually some cool, interesting launches that are going to happen.
But also, like, any interesting data that you can talk about from 18, because, like, 2018's been a fucking weird year in terms of, like, funding and game sales. So I personally am hungry to know what this year's been like.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't looked at too much data, to be perfectly honest. I mean, stuff is definitely, I'll be completely honest, the numbers are definitely down. But you're just like consistently running out of liquid.
I drank my tea way too fast, but the conversation's great, so I don't want to go and get cuppa.
Oh, I hate when that happens. So numbers are definitely down, I'll be perfectly honest. But we have had some really cool successes like Boyfriend Dungeon.
Yay.
And Boyfriend Dungeon, I think, is such a unique game in the sense that like they don't just understand the Kickstarter model. I think they are like the perfect team to look at when you're looking at Kickstarter. Then the amount of outreach that they did leading up to their Kickstarter project is a great example.
Oh, God,
we also have a lot of
don't start your outreach when your Kickstarter project starts.
Please don't do that.
It makes everybody sad.
Yeah, it makes me very, very sad.
Also, Rhymes and Moose was adding on the Kit Fox team that they, in the post-mortem, Tanya actually mentioned that they had work for hire lined up right after Moonhunters. So if Moonhunters had tanked, they were all right. So... Yeah.
That's 100% correct. And Tanya and Victoria, the entire team, but Tanya and Victoria in particular, I think are just people that should be out there in the world speaking more about games because they are...
We had Victoria on the show and it was really good.
I love her so much.
Sorry, because I could talk about Boyfriend Dungeon and how lovely that team is. So you were saying they were the best example of Kickstarter, and I cut you off with facts there, so...
That's okay.
Going back to your point...
Yeah, so I think they are a great example of how to use Kickstarter perfectly as a video game. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that we've had a really good number of successful indie titles fund this year. It's weird to say he's an indie, but Swery with The Good Life funded early this year, which was super exciting.
Very true. And that project, was it Fig that it didn't succeed on?
Correct, yes.
So, what that tells me as an external is that there wasn't the investment confidence in the project, but there was the consumer confidence in the project, which is interesting.
Yeah. I think also like the days of these like $1 million campaigns, does it mean that they're gone? Probably not. But does it mean that they're on pause for the moment? Probably. That's kind of what I think they mean more than anything else. And I think that's okay because, again, what is it that you're trying to come to Kickstarter for? Is it to make $1 million or is it to finish the game that you think needs to be out there in the world? I personally am more interested in talking to people that are like, I think this is a game that needs to be out in the world and I'm excited to kind of go on this journey. Rather, I want to make $1 million. Like, okay, that's okay. If you want to make $1 million, it's totally fine.
I'm 100% down on those ones because, one of the things that we're very keen on the show is the reason why we talk about both the artistic intent and the business of games is that you you can't have one without the other. We've seen what happens when people try and put projects forward without any artistic intent. And we've seen what happens when people are like, oh, I'm going to make it's an MMO, right? And it's got everything in it. And you've got to go on planets and you can hug an alien. And the alien will be like, ah! And they'll be like, yeah. And I want $30,000 to make it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this to be rude, but the Prolo was joking earlier that their first Kickstarter, they asked for 15k British pounds to bring a project from naught to life. And in their own admission, that was exceedingly naive.
I think that's something that is super common that we see. And I think I'm not sure if it was the Prolo?
Yes.
Yes, I'm not sure if it was the Prolo or not who said this too, that they were getting comments on their Kickstarter of you need more money and also why do you need so much money? And that's one of the issues is I don't think that's a Kickstarter thing. I think that's a industry knowledge thing. I think people just don't know how much it costs to make games.
Yes.
And like we can sit here and rant and rave and scream and yell and this is how much it costs to make games.
I can scream and yell? Brilliant!
As much as you want.
It is my show. No, sorry. But you're 100% right. There's a real disconnect between the knowledge industry side of how much it costs to make a game and how much of that information is put to the consumer.
Yeah. And the reality too is it's like you can tell consumers as much as you want, but to a certain degree, some consumers are just going to do this.
Yes.
No matter what you do.
No, just add multiplayer. No, it's fine. You just push a button.
Yeah. And I don't think it's their fault. I think like it's a challenging thing, right? Because you're like, well, I want people to play my game, but also like we live in an age where everybody is going to give you their opinion, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And that's okay.
Very much so.
Yeah, and I think at that point it's kind of up to you to sort of say like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to what I want to listen to, end of story. And there is a certain degree of like, you're not going to be able to please everyone, and you there's a level of integrity that you kind of need to maintain of like, no, this is my vision, this is what I believe in. And people are going to kind of filter out from that sense. And that's something that we see on Kickstarter a lot is like, people do use Kickstarter to kind of see like, is there interest in this? And that's okay, but you do kind of need to accept that like sometimes people are going to not be interested in it. That's a harsh reality, but at least you're learning that.
Yes, because I mean, I joked earlier about the whole space games don't sell. There was a period where like space games were being released to the market and no one was buying them. Now, I in my heart of hearts believe that a lot of the titles that were being put forward were by the kind of like the mid-tier to low-tier in-house studios, and they weren't of the best quality. But this became kind of like the industry knowledge. Users were burnt out on space games that weren't very good. If we all got together and tried to release a standalone Battle Royale game like in 2019 and kickstarted it, we would see a lot of negative pushback. We wouldn't see the same amount of investment because users are burnt out. I always describe the games industry as like charting waters. Like, you know, there are currents, there are ebbs and flows. You can't predict it perfectly, but, you know, to know how the seas work, that'd be the best way to get your Kickstarter going.
This is amazing.
Oh yeah, you didn't see my, there's a couple of people in chat who, their first introduction to me was doing a talk about, like, direct community engagement. But I did it in the style of the Captain's Wife's Lament, and it's still one of the best speeches I think I've ever done. And I made it up on the spot. So...
See, you're using that drama degree.
We all have our gifts. Right. So, just having a look at the questions and stuff. We will be getting into the chit-chattery with you lovely, lovely folks. Hey! My buddy Baron Sheep. What, oh friend! Was there for said talk.
Nice.
Okay, so I feel we've been the brandy swilling conversationalist a little bit of this. Let's get messy. Let's get into the guts of this. So,
sounds great.
Assuming that 2019 has some similarities to 2018 in terms of like you know, user behavior and things like that. Plus, you know, the giant rock that is Red Dead Redemption 2 will have crashed into the earth and killed us all. So that's coming out on the 25th, this month.
Sorry, say that again?
Red Dead's coming out 25th this month.
Oh, yeah.
Rest in peace, anyone launching a game in October.
Yeah, seriously.
I will admit, I did send the joke I sent to you. I sent to pretty much everyone for my post-PAX invite, which is 2018, or as I call it, Red Dead reschedule your launch.
Nice.
Thank you. Okay, so assuming the data that we have from 2018 for like successful projects and projects released carries across, what are some of the things that you've seen that have worked, and some of the absolute do not do's? Let's get into the guts of this.
Yeah, so the number one thing that you do not want to do is launch without a community. That is, man. And I get it. I understand why people do it, but just don't.
just don't.
Like, just don't. That'd be cool. Yeah, that's one of the number one things that I see. We just sort of tell people in general, like, you should launch at the absolute last time that you can launch, right? So if you're like, well, I could probably wait like 6 months. I don't really need to launch now, but I kind of want to. Don't. Because what's going to happen is that you want to make sure that your community is built up to as to a point where they're almost like begging you for the project to launch.
Yeah.
Because that's when you're going to have people back you on day one. If you're like, well, I mean, I like kind of have a small community and like I could probably put it up and grow a community, and it might be like a little challenging, but I can make it happen. It's going to be a miserable experience for you and your community. Oh, I see a great question.
Go for it.
Reflective Gamer says, okay, this may sound naive, but how do you even start a community? That is a great question, and there are a lot of different ways to do that. Number one, if you're in this chat, you are part of a community.
Longship represent!
So Aaron Feathers says, I need to know. Okay, so this is already a great place to start. There's a community that exists right now and you're talking with them.
Yeah.
Number 2, Twitter. Twitter is a great place.
Indeed.
Follow a ton of game dev people. Follow Will. Follow me. I am a nobody on Twitter, but that's okay.
For now. The thing
Follow
that
Rami.
The thing that I definitely follow Rami. If you're not following Rami, you're missing out. Especially, the thread about his mum playing Final Fantasy 15 was
Oh
one
my
of the
God.
great joys of this world.
It's so good.
So, jumping around, what I would add to that is that, so you're looking at the idea of putting forward a community, and you want to put forward a community based around a project. Maybe it's not a fully fledged idea. Maybe it's not ready. Get yourself some key art, Mother Hubbards. What was... the title of it's completely dropped out of my head. And I'm not going to discuss the project, but there was a piece of key art put out that was a bunch of kids in a playground against a horde of zombies. And they've got like super soakers and bats.
Oh, yeah, what was that game?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Someone in chat's going to know it.
Yeah. Now, the project didn't do very well. That's true. But they managed to grow a concept and a community out of a single piece of... I mean, I'd call it key art. I don't think it was necessarily designed to be that. I think it was just a fun concept.
There Goes the Neighborhood?
No, it wasn't There Goes the Neighborhood.
It wasn't? Okay.
No, I've got it. Is it Playground something?
Yeah, anyway.
Zombie Playground.
Oh, there we go. Right. So
unfortunately, the title had production difficulties, but that's not the story.
Yeah. I think one of the key takeaways from that is one of the best ways to utilize something like Twitter, and hey, I get it. If you hate Twitter, I totally get it. It is a horrible website.
It's a horrendous war zone of death and destruction. But
and I'm on it every day.
Yeah, same. I've seen shit you people wouldn't believe. Yeah, I've seen tweets on fire off the shoulder of a riot.
It is truly a dumpster fire that I'm willing to dive into.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what Twitter is. But one of the cool things about Twitter that I will say is there is an existing community of game dev people. And one of the things that you can do is if you have a shareable GIF of any gameplay that you have, post it, do all of the ridiculous hashtags, hashtag game dev, hashtag indie dev, blah, 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 blah.
Screenshot
like
Saturday, the whole shebang.
All of that. And people are always checking that. And you should check those. And you should engage with that community.
Hells yes.
That is one of the...
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to add one thing which is a bugbear of mine, which is if you do that, and you should, if you are looking to launch a game project, put the name of your fucking game! Don't make me go 8 tweets deep to find out what the fucking game's called!
Yeah.
So help me!
Yeah. And a lot of this stuff is like, yeah, duh, of course. But like, it's easy to kind of forget about that. So Twitter is like a great place to start. So a great place to start your community. Second thing, Discord. Mm-hmm. You should just have a Discord. You should be in Discords. You should be engaging in Discords. The thing with community that I think people forget is like everybody does have an existing community, whether that's your friends and your family, you know, people you went to college with, like whatever it is, that's totally fine. But having a Discord specifically for you and your game is a great way to kind of centralize that, because the thing with Twitter too is that there's like a really weird algorithm where all I see is people retweeting political hate, and it is what it is. But if you're able to kind of like centralize your community into a Discord, that is one of the best ways for you to like really grow your community. So now let's say that you have 10 people in your Discord. That's awesome. First of all, the fact that you've got 10 people, like celebrate that. Celebrate every little thing that you can. So with those 10 people, what you want to do is you want to engage with them as much as possible. Talk to them, have them talk with each other. But one of the cool things that I've seen people do is so every Tuesday you can do an interview of some kind, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm going to do interview Tuesday or whatever it is, or like talk Tuesday. I don't know. You can have some like fancy name with it.
Give away all my secrets! But yeah,
and so
reaching outside of your existing community is a way to let people know that you exist.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with this may seem completely like nefarious and silly. And so you're like, well, I'm only talking to 10 people every Tuesday. But those 10 people are going to essentially become your advocates. They're the ones that are going to say, hey, you should also join this Discord that this person that I really believe in is a part of. It doesn't happen overnight, and you have to consistently do it. But, you know, what in life is worth doing, you know, I forgot the phrase, and I will stop.
What was the, I remember the term from comics being like the magical 100. that when you hit a situation where you have 100 fans who will buy your book, then you can become self-sustaining. Now, that was a thing that was put forward back when Seattle was still affordable, so I guess, move to Portland or somewhere like that. But community has always been key, and thinking about that is... I mean, I have a background in community management, so I'm obviously going to be like, community is cool! Doot, doot!
Yeah.
But there is... That was one of the things that annoyed me about that article. I'm sorry to keep dragging this horse so I can beat it some more. But it did not put forward much in the way of discussion about, community following. The person who wrote it, I honestly believe that they come from the mindset of, that good games sell themselves, or at least used to, which is why they honestly believe things have kind of keeled over.
Yeah.
And just quickly before we jump back onto your super hot tips, as we've had a couple of people that have joined in. I am joined by the astutely awesome Anya from Kickstarter, and we are talking video games on Kickstarter. We are talking crowdfunding of games. I've been ranting a lot about things. Shocking, I know. So, come on in, take a seat, grab a cuppa. If you've got any questions, throw them in chat. If you try and throw them at me, it helps because I can see them.
Yes, and I saw some of you help me with the quote, "Nothing worth doing is easy." Thank you, I appreciate that.
That's been my mantra for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and someone mentioned Malcolm Gladwell, which I think someone was saying they think that the 100 plus follower or the 100 person rule is coined by Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell also is the guy behind the if you master something within 10,000 hours. So,
okay.
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback off of that, one of the other things...
I never played Eve.
Yeah, and I don't actually know if that's true, because I've definitely done 10,000 hours of television watching, and I'm still terrible at watching television because I get distracted. But that's fine.
There's a point.
So let's say that you're at a point where you're like, cool, I have a small community. Great. So you should also this sounds really silly to say, but it's amazing how many times I don't see this. You should also be working on your game. So you should kind of give yourself your own milestones, right? Give yourself your own kind of I want to make sure that I have a prototype by this date. I want to have an alpha by this date, because what can tend to happen is if you don't give yourselves any sort of milestones or sort of working things to work towards, it can get just kind of open-ended and strange and scary. So give yourself your own milestones. That's completely fine. And that's one of the challenges that I think indie creatives have. Yeah,
Trello is great for that. Because I've done small team project management, and you can do it for personal. Trello, set dates, set milestones. For this milestone, we will hit these things. And then you would be amazed how much more ground you cover, because while it's lovely to do that, I'll work on it whenever I want. One thing we have seen is projects, even when they've been successfully funded, have drifted off into the ether of I'm just going to add some stuff here, also, there have been some lovely comments, so do you mind if I jump into chat and just... Because SCPL... has a 1K Discord for their gaming community, and what they were saying is that being one-on-one with them has got them where they are. They love that, and that having that direct engagement with those users is how to build. Baron Sheep started a small community for a very niche audience, and it's already 3 times larger than expected. Communities are much more powerful than expected, so thank you, Baron Sheep.
Good job.
SCPL. All right, Roxy. Roxy was saying that, you're from Kickstarter. Oh, well, there we go. And then... Reflective just says, make deadlines or you breed laziness. There are some incredible individuals out there who can be focused and dedicated and just, Jonathan Blow. I don't know what that guy does. I don't know when he sleeps. I don't know when he eats. But he makes a lot of stuff.
Yep.
I'm not Johnny Blow, I'm afraid. I'm just me. And I don't have that same kind of dedication, so yeah.
Yeah.
Back in
So
Trello. Go for it.
Yeah, Trello's great. I also, so like some of the best advice that I received, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I fully believe in it.
Go for it.
So I think one of the things that we tend to do is we always try to sort of play catch up, right? Just in the sense of like, I know that this is what my skills are, and I know that this is where my weaknesses are.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time trying to work on those weaknesses. And I had someone say this to me, and it just made so much sense. Instead of focusing on your weaknesses, why don't you continue to work on your strengths and make those strengths even stronger? So if you know that community building is you are not good at that, that's okay, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to be willing to help you out. If it's a friend, if it's another community manager, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they would work for you or with you, but they can give you some tips and tricks in order to say like, okay, well, I know I need to kind of work on this a little bit. So if I can take these 3 bullet points of, okay, this is what they've taught me in terms of community management, put those into practice, and then make sure that you focus on your strengths. And I'm not saying that you ignore your weaknesses.
No.
That's definitely not what I'm saying. But if you can focus on your strengths, you're going to be even better at what you do in like those positive areas. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. It's one of the things we talk a lot about in the show, more from a game dev focus than rather from the like production and like business of. But lean into your skills. We've seen a lot of projects that do incredible work with like economy of art, so to speak. You know, you have a team that's heavy in writing. You know, don't make an action third-person shooter. Lean into your gifts, lean into your skills. I mean, we saw with a couple of projects that they had really strong kind of humorous visual narrative. And they just went whole hog on those and created some really impressive things. Whereas trying to build for mediocrity, unfortunately, is not ideal. Trying to pick a specialist skill set that your team does exceptionally, pour all your stat points in that, min-max the bloody hell out of it. That's where I was grasping for. That was the point I was reaching up to find.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, if you want to focus on like working on those weaknesses or working on the things that maybe you're not as strong in, I don't think that's something that you want to do for a game that you really want to release, right? Yeah. Because the other side of this that we don't really talk about a lot in game dev is essentially any other art form, which is practice, constantly practicing.
Yes.
My friend John Cooney.
Yes.
My friend John Cooney does this really great talk about the importance of small games. And consistently making small games, if it's just like a side project or just like, you know, a hobby, whatever it is, but basically always be making games.
Always be making games.
Yeah, always be making games.
It seems stupid, but the thing is, you're only going to be doing something for the first time once. So get it out of the way before it matters. Like doing the project of taking a game and putting it on Steam, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through that so few people are prepared for.
Yeah.
Learning how to interact with users who have acquired your title through itch.io, even for free and stuff like that. Yeah. That's invaluable.
Yeah. I think also like go to as many game jams as you can. Participate in as many game jams as you can, because that's one of the ways, like that's one of the things that I think I hear a lot is like, well, how do I find people? Game jams, online game jams, global game jams. Just do it. If you can, do Train Jam.
Oh yeah, that one and all. So if you've not heard of Train Jam is a 2-day, 3-day?
I think it's 3 days.
And it's from the East Coast to the West Coast on a train, and it's just a squad of indie devs making games on a train from I want to say Boston, Chicago. To San Francisco, and then they arrive at GDC, and then you show off, or at least the top winners are shown off at GDC, and it's phenomenal. And this is one of those horrible Twitter things where it's organised by, and I can't remember her real name, but I can remember her. Thank you. I was like Ms. Minotaur.
Yes, Adria Wallach.
But yeah, so the TLDR on that one is, you know, going to these events which are primarily focused on creation is incredibly valuable. Also,
and you can do that on the internet.
The other thing that no one's been really talking about And I'm sorry to again derail it. I do want to get back onto
No, you're
answering
fine.
Kickstarter questions and things like that. But all the independent teams that I saw at GDC who were like spooling up projects to release like this year or next year, they aren't like 4 fresh-faced teenagers. They're like 10, 20-year veterans. Like,
Yeah.
no offense, but all the heavyweights have realized that they can go indie and release the project they've always wanted to do. And they're doing good. One title which I can't, I don't think I can mention because I don't think the embargo's up, but, you know, the guy who was about my age had 15 years dev. The other two were like ex-AAA. You know, between them they had 100 years dev experience. And they were making a very quirky but interesting little indie title. And I'm like, yo, wait, ain't nothing soft going on there.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of one of the, to me, that's why indie games are cool. It's because you're able to make something that you wouldn't be able to make anywhere else. And so, not to bring up the article again, but that was my biggest sort of gripe with the article was but indie games are about something that's different.
Yes.
And I don't want the different games. I don't want the weird games to just fall to the wayside because everybody's focused on the monetary side of games. There should still be stuff that you see at a Maze Fest in Berlin every year. Stuff like that kind of needs to exist. We need that innovation to happen. We need stuff like Time for Cat to happen because without Time for Cat, we wouldn't have Super Hot.
Very true. And yeah, okay, we're gonna jump to questions in just a second. So if you've got any questions for our lovely guest, now's the time to cook them up while we're talking back and forth. But what was really interesting as well is, again, on the being grown up side, like realistic expectations. We talked with Scar Studios a couple of weeks back. Now they've not gone the crowdfunding route because they haven't needed to. They got lucky. But one of the things they did is they kept their dev costs sensible. They didn't hire 5 people as soon as they got funding. They didn't get a studio or an office. And they were able to survive a project failing financially and then went on to make even better projects. And if they had gone for the traditional business model route, they would have died on that one. And we look at Telltale, who have just been running the knife edge for apparently years, who, because they were unable to secure stupid amounts of funding, are now dead in the water. As Roxy's saying, rip Telltale. And
I think that's Tale too. Like, I wonder how much of it was falling victim to what's currently happening in the Bay Area in terms of like, what were their studio costs for their studio in San Rafael? Along with horrible management, obviously, but also like what is the rent for that studio? It's just to let so many people go without a severance too. It's just so cold, and that is, to get even more controversial, that is why unions need to be existing.
Oh yeah, we're very much pro that idea. We had Kate Edwards on the show last week. Was it last week? God, time is weird. We had Kate Edwards on the show, and yeah, it's having something there, having some way of sorting those. However, I would like to make a suggestion. I do think that, you know, when the unionisation finally happens, that Warframe's We All Lift Together becomes the official industry anthem. It's so good. It's so good.
I love it, yeah. Oh my gosh, I just love Kate. Oh, She's like one of my favorite people. I sort of have like a secret rule though, because anytime I'm at a conference with her, first of all, it's always lovely and amazing. And I just feel smarter and like I need to do better every time I talk to her. But we can get into easily a 4-hour conversation and time has not passed. And I just need to be careful.
Yeah, the thing is, I have to tear myself away from conversations with Kate because, like, it's... we were chatting at GDC, and I just went over to say hi. I was like, yo, how's it going? And like an hour later, we're like, yo, so China's taken over, and talking about like international markets affecting our current, like, at least at the higher end of development, like really affecting people's decisions.
Yeah.
Joke's on them. Chinese government's cracking down on video games, so
Oh man.
that gold mine's dead.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It's just wild. Yeah. If anyone ever has any like global questions or globalization questions, Kate she's the person to talk to.
Yeah. Anyway, so bring it back. So let's have a look-see. All right, come on, people. We have a stonkingly good guest. I know all of you are interested in this topic. Give me some questions. Give me some hot ones. DJ was just saying, can you ask Anya who the person is in her team in Chicago? I'd like to buy them a coffee.
We have a person in Chicago named Trin. Trin does digital outreach, and so Trin's job is Trin runs a podcast that we have.
Very cool.
And runs our games newsletter.
Very cool. So Roxy was asking, and I think this is one that I'd love to hear your insight onto. How do you recommend finding devs that are looking for a publisher? Wait, now hang on. How do you recommend?
Oh yeah, I don't understand the question.
Sorry, I misread it when I read it in my head because I thought they were asking about devs finding publishers.
Are you asking about devs finding publishers?
Well, let's go with that.
Okay, yes, okay. So there's a couple different ways to go about doing that. First of all, you should look at what the publisher has published. Okay, this seems a little bit strange, but that is 100% what you want to do. So for example, if you're like, I have an RPG and you're going to a publisher that like, for whatever reason, only publishes point and click adventure games, don't reach out to them.
It's okay to say no.
My camera just stopped. Okay, I think we're good. Sorry.
We're good. Sorry.
Technical difficulties on my end.
Actually, I think that was on my end. We're good.
Okay,
Everything's
cool.
fine. Everything's fine.
So I would say make a list of publishers that you think are interesting. And it could be anything. If you're like, let's say that like Annapurna is, how about trying to find small indie publishers? Okay, so research. Look at who are your friends being published by. Armor Games, for example, is a very small indie publisher who is an incredible indie publisher.
Yep. And Armor Games has a massive powerhouse that a lot of people don't know about.
Yep. Congregate too. Congregate is I mean, I don't want to say
Congregate,
small
don't
indie,
feck
but
around.
Yeah. So look for one of the things that it seems a little bit strange, but what you can do is look at games that you like, look at small indie games that you like, and see who they're published by, and then kind of go from there. Okay, who is this publisher? Let me do a little bit of research into them. A lot of times the publishers have their Twitter DMs open, so you can just reach out to them through Twitter or even like cold emails. Cold emails you're probably not going to get as many responses from, but like for whatever weird reason, I feel like the entire games industry just uses Twitter. Like
it's where I will be honest, I've done most of my good stuff. And the other thing, if you don't mind my adding too,
yeah, of course,
is that when indie publisher hunting, look at the flavor, look at the style.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you're doing a gorgeous pixel narrative adventure, you kind of don't want to go to the New Bloods or Raw Fury. You want to go for like Chucklefish or maybe Team 17, maybe. But if you're doing like a 3D psychological delve into the very understating of the nature of humanness, Annapurna's friend or fellow traveler.
Yep.
Sorry, I thought that was worth adding because Devolver and Adult Swim are very picky about the games that they publish because they want them to have a certain something.
Yeah. If for some of the larger publishers too, and I know we're talking about indie publishers, but for some of the larger publishers, the thing to keep in mind is while there might be more money involved, the creative control that you have is going to sort of be the trade-off.
Yeah, the more money that you are being offered, the less control you're going to have overall. Some companies will be like, yo, I'll give you $3 million, but we own your IP.
And that's not like a hard and steady fast rule. It's sort of a general rule. And so the thing that I always tell people too is like, you need to read your contract. It's amazing how many people just don't read their contract. So read your contract, at least with like large companies, there's sort of this unspoken rule that there's going to be 3 rounds of feedback.
Yeah,
That's pretty common.
If you accept the contract on the first run, they know you're small
You haven't
fry.
read it.
Yeah.
They know you haven't read it. Yeah. I'm looking for a way to plug in power source because my laptop is at like 34%. But
Danger mode! If you need to go
Sorry.
find your power plug.
I'll figure it out.
So Abyssal Wolfen's got a question which I wanted to throw at you, which is any suggestions on how to get a project featured on Kickstarter? Apart from awesome key art, is there anything else that can help projects' chance of being put into that spotlight?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. Number one, talk to me. Hello. My email is anya@kickstarter.com.
Is it on your Twitters?
I don't think it's on my Twitter. I probably should put my email up there, although I'm always nervous about that.
Maybe not. But do you mind if I link your Twitter to these lovely people's?
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine.
Okay, because typing with one hand is very difficult, but I can cheat and I can do this.
That's me. So yeah, talk to me. So all of our features are managed by an editorial team. And I get this question a lot. And so one of the things to keep in mind is the editorial team doesn't look at things from the perspective of this team has made X amount of money, they've made X amount of money in this amount of time. That doesn't exist. But you definitely want to have sort of like the main pillars on your project page. Make sure you have a video. Make sure that you explain what the game is. Make sure you have decent rewards. Like make sure you have a cool Kickstarter looking page, which is why you would talk to me because I would work with you on that. The second side of that is I am essentially an advocate for you to our editorial team. I will fight for you to get those features. I will explain why this is a cool game. I will explain why you're worthy of a feature. So the best thing to do is talk to me.
Yes, and I'm going to add this because I say this with love. I've spoken with and hung out with a lot of indie developers. There is a time to be modest, and there is a time to be honest, and there is a time to sing your praises. When you are talking to someone like our resplendent guest that we have here, do not hold back on what is cool about your game. Because, I mean, at that point, you've probably begun development, but a lot of the realization of that project is still in the conceptual. So, like, don't undersell it because of your personal modesties.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times I've had people pitch me their games. Well, okay, teeny tiny tangent. I like going and checking out games at GDC. I will do the walks, I'll talk to people because I love video games. And what's been interesting is sometimes games that I know about or have played, and the person is telling me about it, and I'm like, yo, I know your game. You are horribly underselling this.
Yeah. It's amazing how many times I see that, or people are like, I mean, it's like, it's not done. I don't really know. Like, no, just kind of own it. Say like, this is what I'm working on. This is why I'm excited. Because the other side of it is like, if you're not excited about your game, how am I going to be excited about your game?
Yeah, and if you're excited, then that's something that could be taken forward.
Exactly.
Right.
Weird people coming out of conference rooms. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Right, I'm just jumping back in to see if there are any stonkingly cool questions. I mean, Roxy was asking tips for young devs to get your games in the light of interest. Events, biz dev events, shake hands, make friends. Yo. You can do direct. Most publishers have a direct contact line, but that's always a bit tricky. Personally, I prefer meeting people and shaking hands. That's my go-to move.
Yeah. I think also like one of the things to keep in mind is like most places, even if you're in a small remote town, most places there is a games community, whether it's like, you know, just two people sitting in a bar talking about games, still technically a community, or a larger, like a San Francisco, a Boston, a New York, something like that. There's always some sort of game dev meetup. You want to be a part of that community, whatever that local community is. And let's say, for example, you're like, I have no community in my area. So create it.
If it doesn't exist, make it. And
make it.
I don't want to sound horrendously mercenary, but there's a real strength in owning that community.
Yeah.
So,
someone says find out if there's a local IGDA chapter. 100%. absolutely do that. Yeah. And if there isn't, there might be a meetup group of some kind.
That's very true. I mean, one of the things that was really cool was when I was out in New Zealand, there was a local game dev community there, and that was cracking. I mean,
where? I'm sorry?
Because I was based in New Zealand for 2 years in a little town called Dunedin. And there were 2 games companies there. There was us at Rocketworks, where I was at Rocketworks. And then there was Runaway... are they Runaway Play or just Runaway? I forget. Who were Mobile Studio, who are a lovely bunch. And we had a game dev meet, and like uni students would come and drink and hang out with us. But what I didn't know is that Tim, who organised it, was the owner of Renegade PR, who is like an international operation. So like I got introduced to so many different projects by having that kind of direct discussion at a pub meet in Dunedin.
Yep. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, the reality is, everybody plays games.
Yes.
Whether they want to admit it or not. And that doesn't mean that you have to be like the most hardcore, video game player. I don't really like hardcore video games. I think they're boring. I like the weird indie stuff. But I play games. People play cards. Everybody to some degree knows a game. So it's just a matter of tapping into that community. Yeah,
games are a part of culture now, and yeah, I mean, I'm very proud to say that on this game we featured so many like random, weird, esoteric games alongside, doing dives into bigger projects. We did the Gardens Between, I want to say last week or the week before, week before last, pre-Broken Hand. And that was phenomenal. And I love that because we live in the era of digital distribution, that's a game that can exist.
Absolutely, I completely agree.
There was a second half to that point, but it dropped right out the back of my head.
That's okay.
So Rhymes and Moose is saying, any suggestions for a project with something a little deeper, going on more than Here's Not a Game, for example, a project aiming to... so projects that also have a secondary, like, medical or mental health benefit.
So that is a little bit of a dangerous territory for us on Kickstarter, just in the sense that you need to be careful that you aren't claiming to solve any sort of medical issue, right? So if you're like, my game will improve mental health for people, unless there's like some sort of true medical, like something to back that up, and even then, you just kind of can't say stuff like that on Kickstarter. But if it's something where you're like, there's, I'll use Undertale as an example, right? Like Undertale is a great game that's sort of like, there's a lot of issues that is touched on that game. Mostly passive, I'm saying this incorrectly. Passive is basically the theme of the game. And so that's more of sort of a like political theory. But that is a great example of a game that uses something that's not as simple as like, I just think it's really cool and really awesome, and there's a bit of a statement that's associated with the game. That Dragon Cancer, that's pacifist. Thank you. I'm just struggling today. That Dragon Cancer. That Dragon Cancer, which is a hugely emotional game. That's something that's not just passivity. Just kidding. So that's a great game that kind of touches on a lot. That just completely tears at the emotional heartstrings. So that's not something where it's like, it's awesome and I love it, it should be made. It's like, there's a very specific reason that I want this game to be made. So I would say, instead of focusing on aiming at a defined mental health benefit, instead say, this is something that means a lot to me and here's why. That's going to be just as compelling as it's awesome and I love it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna... you don't have to confirm or deny, but I'm going to take a wild stab and a guess, which is that because, once you start getting into things that claim to have genuine health benefits, that's a very different sphere of claims and marketing that could get into potentially harmful or potentially like legally risky waters.
Exactly.
These stones will cure you of all that ails you. How about no?
Well, no.
Right. Man, where are all those great questions from earlier? What's going on, people? What's going on?
Let me see if I can find a power source. Give me one.
All right, you do that. I'll chat with these lovely
jump out
folks.
For 1 second. Okay.
All right, go do the thing. But I may swap out and get some coffee when Anya has returned. So, everybody, if you have just joined us, we have been joined by the I'm running out of big words for good. Anya Combs, who has been answering our Kickstarter questions, our games industry questions. We're going into the guts of things, yo. So, when was the last time you got to chat with someone from Kickstarter? So, if you are thinking of doing a project, if you're just curious, now is the time to bust out those questions, my friends. You know this. Roxy said, you answered all my questions. That's a good point. You busted them out at the right time. That's for certain. Roxy says, gonna make a Kickstarter for a game I'm working on. Give me a minute. I think one of the things we were saying earlier, Roxy, was, yay, power. One of the things we were saying earlier was, you don't have to launch your Kickstarter right away. You can wait till the last point that you need it. I know you were joking. I wanted to riff on it. I was having a good time. I was having a right good time.
Whew.
Right. Hello.
Okay. Hi. To thank my amazing coworkers for helping me out.
I was riffing with Roxy because they've been developing for a good month now. Slow down, you kids. Rolling a fun question in. What advice would you have for someone that wants to back a lot of projects but only has one shelf for games? Yes.
Get a new apartment.
Move. So, crowdfunding in video games has been very. I'm trying to encapsulate the point, because what was interesting is we've seen licensed projects in the board game space from existing IPs do very, very well, and it's been interesting that has a certain amount of consistency to it. Now, I don't know board games, but as it was explained to me, if you're hitting certain beats, being like deliverable miniatures, items in a box, things like that, with an interesting concept, it is very likely to get your board game funded. Are there any elements that you feel that we over in the video game space could learn from that, or at least when pitching in the Kickstartian space?
Yeah, so I think the thing with the licensed board games is that those games have been play tested to oblivion, because the thing with licensed games is you can't just like slap a license on a game and say like, okay, here we go, here's your, here's your Ghostbusters game. It needs to make sense. There needs to be continuity. Because the thing with a licensed game is you're going to have fans be able to call out what's going on in the game in the terms of like, why would this character be doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So having play tested the game to death is one of the best things that I see within the board game community. And I don't truthfully see that being done in slow down, you kids. Ridiculous. Seeing that done in video games, I wish that was done in video games a little bit more. The amount of playtesting that really, truly needs to get done.
Yeah, it's interesting because the information in that respect is out. Like, Valve, back when Valve made video games, they talked constantly about how much, like, user testing they did, how much they looked at user behavior, play testing, how they did not only like heat maps and movements, but they also did eye tracking to look at where users were looking in certain parts. I mean, their whole philosophy of follow the light came from feedback from the direct play testing. They learned how to move the user through an experience by lighting the path for them, so to speak. White boxing your game and getting people to, I guess, and this is the trickier thing, I would say. A board game is always just rules and users. The pieces are representational, but it's designing concept and humans is the board game kind of loop. Whereas it's real fucking easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, well, what you should do, right, is you should white box out your game and have people have a crack at it. And then someone at the back's like, I'm making a narrative story adventure. And I'd be like, heck, good luck.
Yeah, I think the thing with playtesting too is like, you can't just playtest with your friends. that's kind of the harsh reality. Your friends aren't gonna really give you any feedback.
No, because they also people who have had everything explained to them by you over the course of months because you're very enthusiastic are not true playtesters.
Yeah. Well, and you shouldn't be telling them how to play the game, especially with a video game.
Mm-hmm.
They need to figure it out, and if they can't figure it out, that's already that's so much information for you to kind of learn from. Also, make sure that you playtest with a wide range of people, so different ages, different genders. It's really important to do that.
Yes. Because if you're not getting a wide sample set, then you don't know. I mean, it's entirely possible to create projects that are aiming to do something very specific, that are aiming to go for a specific audience. But even within that, the more that you test, the more that you know, the more data you get back. Data is good. Yeah. Data is good.
Data is the best thing. Yeah. You could also you could do something like a playtest night where you I know Armor used to do this. I don't know if Armor Games still does this, but they used to do this at local colleges, like a local community college. Ooh. They would do playtest nights with a game design class.
So jumping back into chat, I mean, Stooge was so okay, I want to take Abyssal Wolfens because it's a straight up business question, and that's flavoursome, which was, is there a minimum amount you suggest a dev look to raise to be taken seriously? Because
yes, so we've done a bit of research on this, and we see that basically the 10K to about 70K seems to be where most people are okay, cool, this seems real. Yeah. Anything less than 10K, people are kind of I don't really know what this is. And that's a very, very wide range. And so what we see between that 10 to 70 is really realistically 30 to 70 is a little bit more realistic. But truthfully, anything less than 10K, people are just kind of that's not enough money to make a video game.
Yeah. That's stonkingly good advice, yo. I didn't have a clever end to that one.
I get excited when I'm I know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
No, it's great. Because this is not a side that I have experience with. You want to talk about how to pitch a project? You want to talk about talking to indie publishers? I've never done the crowdfunding route, so this is a curious new frontier for me, and I'm glad to have our own Sherpa with us. Stooge was going back to one of the additional points we're talking about how community is king. And saying that, how do you recommend an introvert builds community?
The internet.
Look at what it is that you can put forward. It doesn't have to be one's own personality. You can push forward the idea of a concept. Now, I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Kingdom of Death is a board game that has done Kickstarter routes before, right?
Kingdom Death, yes.
Yeah, it's Kingdom Death, isn't it? I don't know why I want an of in there. It's the video gamer in me.
I like Kingdom of Death a little bit more. It's sort of like Bringer of Death. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it rolls better. But one of the things that's very interesting is that they have taken the three, as I held up the hand for four. They're four character playing pieces. And they made kind of caricatures of them, and that's how they do their studio communications. So they essentially created four characters they can use to talk to their community. So they don't have to talk to them. It doesn't have to be, hi, I'm me, I'm making this game, look how modest I am. It's hi, my name's Thud Crunch McPunchhard. I just beat a lion to death with my fists, and now I'm wearing it on my fists. Saxton Hale from TF2, creating characters that allow you to communicate with your communities in a way that you wouldn't. There's a long history of people doing puppetry and silly outfits for that very reason.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was me. Did you have anything to add on that one? I went off on a bloody tangent.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, I think the thing is gonna get a little bit honest here, and I apologize if this seems mean.
Go for it.
So I think if you're resistant to community building, I think if you're saying it's because I'm an introvert, I don't actually think that's why. I think it's because you don't want to do it. And I think there's a little bit of a reality check that you need to do with yourself and say, like, is this because I am just a shy person, or is this because I don't want to do this? And you need to be able to really honestly answer that for yourself. Now, if it is something where you're like, I am completely terrified of people and I know I need to have a community and I just can't do this, I would very, very like strongly say to yourself, okay, I need outside help in terms of like, I need a community manager or a friend to help me with this.
Yeah.
However, if it's, I just don't want to do it, that's also okay. And that's completely valid, but that is something that you're kind of need to get over if you do want to like release a game and, you know, do something on Kickstarter. It's a harsh reality. And I hate to be the person to say that, but it is also like, that's truth.
It's an important conversation to have. And
yeah, there's someone saying introversion isn't being bad at social things, it's being drained by them. Look, trust me, I get it. I'm an introvert. I need like 2 or 3 days to myself. So in that case, I would say, again, have a little bit of a reality check to yourself and say, okay, well, I can't do this community building thing every single day, and that's okay. And if you need time where you're like, I know I have, this is how big my cup is in terms of like what I can deal with. Once I've reached here, I know it's time for me to take a break so I can so I don't get to this point. So I can kind of like just, or however you want to look at it. So, okay, I need to take a little bit of a break, and that's completely fine. Like, that's something that you need to figure out for yourself.
If we're doing real talk, yes, it makes a lot of sense. If we're doing real talk, there is another thing that I want to add on this one, which is it is very important to find your voice and how you talk, but do talk. Whether it's a piece of incredible art that you put out, you know, once a month, once a week, however, whether it's, you know, like silly little GIF animations, however you are communicating with the individuals you want to build a community with, you've got to do it. There's, if you, introversion is a part of your personality, but that is not, okay. You can see where I'm trying to go with this one whilst not being, because I do believe that, you know, in coming years we'll get more of a complete picture of like human interaction methods. I don't believe it is this like Sith Jedi, you know, introverts versus extroverts in this battle to the high heavens. Being an extrovert is great, except for when it's not. Because, you know, I was saying about how like people like Jonathan Blow who are incredibly motivated, if left to my own devices, if, you know, left alone for too long, I implode, and it can completely stall any form of creative project. Mm-hmm. There's no recharge from being on my lonesome. It's a complete carnage fest.
Yeah.
So what I do is I weaponize the tools I have. When I am out and about, go talk to everybody, make everything happen, doing things like this, chatting with people direct one-to-one, but I don't have an artistic, I can't go off into a corner, create an asset of any description and bring it forward calmly. That's not...
Yeah.
So, working out the best ways that I could communicate within my industry and communicate within the internet sphere was as much a trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
And I think that because with the extrovert skill set, you only ever see people when they're at their peak.
Yeah.
You don't... It's like giant robots. It's great seeing a giant robot punching a massive monster in the Gabba, and you're like, giant robots are the best! But what you don't see is the thousands and thousands of man-hours and support teams that go into building it and taking it forward. Sorry.
Yeah. No, so just to kind of piggyback off of that.
Please.
So my job as a outreach person is my job does require me to do a lot of face-to-face interaction. And I'm a very quiet person. I keep to myself a lot. I'm very much I don't like big crowds, you know, very classic sort of quote introvert characteristics. And I have definitely more than once suffered from panic attacks going to conferences because it's overwhelming and it's too much. And I start to see, I get blurry vision and I can't breathe and all that good stuff. And so what I've done,
Yay!
It's super fun. So I've kind of learned a couple of tricks for myself where I was like, okay, well, this obviously isn't working. So I know that in order to make myself feel better before I do conferences, I do little rituals. I do little things that I know are going to make me feel better. So part of that is I will get up in the morning and I will exercise because I know that's going to just make me feel better, which is totally fine. I have a cup of coffee to myself. I will sit in silence and just drink a cup of coffee. I will have breakfast wherever it is that I am by myself because I know I'm only going to have X amount of time to myself. So I need to, just kind of keep that in mind. No more tea. I'm on a delay. That's why I said that. Not just like weird conversation. Anyway, so then
but when your ritual.
Yeah. So these are some of my little rituals that I know. They're very small and they may seem completely like ridiculous and silly, but it is going to make me feel better before I end up going to something like PAX. So then when I get to PAX, I already know that once I get there and once I go through the crazy crowd of people, I'm going to feel overwhelmed, and I just anticipate that. So I just let myself sit with it.
Yeah.
And I sit with it and I say, okay, I feel extremely uncomfortable. I get sweaty, I get gross, like I get super nervous, and I just sit with it until it goes away. Sometimes that's me just like going into a little corner by myself, being on my phone because I don't have to look at people, and I wait for it to pass, and then I just continue along my day.
Which is way cool. I mean, the extrovert method of this one is very different because it's getting there. As an extrovert, like, when you are alone and by yourself, like, everybody hates you, no one likes you, no one's going to want to see you. Why would you ever go? That's stupid and dumb and bad. And just like, I don't want to do anything. It's having to push yourself into that, because once you're in that crowd, I mean, that's the thing that I derive charge from. Like, the overwhelming crowds for myself become like again, waves and torrents. And I just let them carry me along. It's like, all right, this is the way I'm going around because this is the way the crowd's going. Yay!
Yeah. I think the other side of it too is like I've learned one of the things that works for me. And again, this is for me, so
of course.
Take it for what it is I'll give myself little rewards if I know like I have to do a panel in front of a huge group of people, which I've had to do. I did my first panel I ever moderated was at PAX East, and it was at a panel that was so big that there was standing room only.
Oh,
I was
no big deal.
Terrified. No big deal. I was shaking, completely shaking. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to get through this. Like, I can't run away. There's nothing I can do. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give myself a small reward. And that's, it can be whatever you want. It can be, for me, it was like, I'm going to take a little bit of time to myself and I'm just going to go walk around by myself. I'm not going to be around anybody. I'm just going to go walk because I enjoy walking. So it was like, okay, I'm going to take a 15-minute and just walk by myself. And that was like a little reward that I gave to myself. Sometimes it's like an extra cup of coffee. Sometimes it's going to lunch early, whatever it is. Like, yeah. I deserve this and I'm going to take it. And so I'll give myself little rewards after a conference, something like that. And even like, after the conference is over, right? So when I'm back home in my apartment, that might be like, I'm going to take time for myself and I'm going to cook a meal that like everything from scratch, because I know not only do I derive joy from this, but it's also something that at the end of the day is going to make me feel good. Yeah. Right? It's all about like getting those good feelings to come back in. So that way I'm not just at that point as an introvert where I'm on my couch unable to move for 2 days because I need to completely recharge myself. Yeah. I'll kind of like get my brain into that place where I'm like, I'm doing all of this, number one, because it's my job and I love it and it's all great and awesome. But also like, I know that there's a reward for me waiting at the end of this. Yeah. That doesn't work for everybody, and I fully acknowledge that, and I completely respect that. These are just the weird tools and tricks that I've learned for myself.
Well, and I know it feels like we're going off on a mad tangent, but this is all incredibly relevant, because to know yourself is to know where your strengths are, which also means knowing what you're not good at. And if you are asking a huge community of people, hey, can you give me money so I can make a game about a hot dog that thinks he's a superhero? Like, you're good. Oh man, that was a great idea. Feck, no one steal that. But knowing yourself, knowing what you can deliver and what you can do, rather than the ideal of what you can do, is very important. Like one of the things I had to learn about my work habits is that I am super productive first thing in the morning. After lunch for like an hour or so, doesn't matter what it is, I'm just utterly useless in an office environment. Like, I can sit there and look at emails. If I write anything, it's going to be a whole load of shite. So I prefer, like, just chilling and illing for a bit around there, and then I'll usually work into the evening, because I know what it is, like, once 5 o'clock kicks back in, I'm like, ha-ha! Let's go! It was... You know, it was an important thing to learn and not something I could be taught. But by knowing my productivity scale, productivity cycle, I was then able to equate like how many hours I know I can output a day and how much I know I can do without like super overloading. And, yeah.
I think one of the things that was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn was sitting with the uncomfortableness, right? So like just... Sometimes you're just going to be uncomfortable and it sucks and it's really shitty. Sorry. But
no,
like,
it's fine.
Sometimes you just kind of need to sit with it, because a lot of times what we end up doing, and that sort of like mental push and pull, at least for me, which is like where a lot of my panic attacks will come from, is this concept of like, I'm feeling something that's bad, or I don't feel good and I shouldn't feel that way. And so it's this like, I tend to spiral with it. And it took a lot of practice, and it's not something that happened overnight. It took me a good like 2 years to really just like be mindful of just sitting with it and saying, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable. There's no reason for me to feel uncomfortable, but it's okay because I feel like this now, but I'm not going to feel like that forever. Actually, and just sitting.
I'd like to go back to one of your early points about, you know, always been making games. Is that if you don't... Video games isn't just sitting in your bedroom smashing at Unity until it does what you need it to. You know, it is interacting with people. It is going to these spaces. Like, GDC is invaluable if you can afford it. So go to a GDC before you need to go to GDC.
Yes.
Learn the ebb and flow. Learn that the W is full of, you know, very shifty individuals and all the PR wankers.
Avoid the W and go to the Marriott.
Yeah. Especially if you can go to the Death Star bar if it's not jammed.
Well, and spend the $15 and go to that party.
Oh, God, yes. Although, one of the ones I went to this year, because I didn't do that party this year, but we did the Raw Fury Karaoke.
Oh, my God, yes, with Callum.
It was so good.
Tweet at Callum and say, I want to go to karaoke.
Yeah. And that was amazing. And they had, like, the machine learning peeps. I met so many business contacts at that party.
Yeah. You know what's funny is, so my husband and I were originally going to go to the karaoke party, and it didn't work out. But what we ended up doing, and this again was one of those just like, I can't be around a group of people I can't do it. So I grabbed Matt Gamble and then my friends from Massive Monster, and we went to a private karaoke room in Japantown.
That's super cool.
Our own night, where it was the last night of GDC, and my new friend Keaton, who's just a lovely human. And I was like, it's just going to be a small crew. This is exactly what I need.
Yeah.
And it was like, we still talk about it.
Yeah. Actually, that is one thing. So if you do like GDC's, PAX's, there are so many times you'll get the chance to quietly hang out with peeps, but they're very rarely advertised. You won't see like chill hangouts on the, you know, the cult of GDC parties or whatever that Facebook group's called. So
yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I have conflicted feelings about GDC parties. Part of it is like, this is a whole separate topic, but like being a woman in games, I don't always feel super comfortable at a lot of the GDC parties, and I've had issues in the past where I've had some issues in the past with some of the parties. And so I've just kind of learned, like, I know pretty much who's going to be at some of the parties. And so I'm like, okay, cool, I can go because these specific people are there.
Yeah.
If I don't know people that are going, I just don't go.
Yeah, that is very safe. If you're going, I mean, I would say to you lovely people in chat, find a squad, stick with them.
You need a con buddy.
Yeah, do not leave your con buddy behind. Never split the party. Anyway, because I could take this off on a whole other tangent. Super quickly though, I was at the infamous Microsoft party with the dancing girls. That was my first GDC, and it was so awkward. Like, I'm trying to have this genuine biz dev conversation with this lass who was working on the hardware and architecture of HoloLens, and someone wearing a Paddy's Day stripper outfit comes up and tries to start a conversation. And I'm like, what is happening here?
Yeah. So...
That was really weird.
There's also some other fallout that happened at that party with a couple women where they were assaulted by party goers that I think wasn't really discussed.
Yeah. You're right, because the visible drama went everywhere, and I know a few people who were, I don't say whistleblowers, but were talking about that one, and they still get crap for it on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
But it did kind of wash over all the other stuff. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and from the shitty parties that happened, like this is not unique to games. This is also just like this happens at bars, whatever, blah 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 blah.
No, we have. I don't know how long we have your time for, and your visibility.
I'm just keeping my eye out because we're supposed to do a stream at some point, and I'll let you know when they come downstairs and start yelling at me.
Okay, because I am very much the belief, we're still growing as an industry, and there's so much we need to do to be safer, be more inclusive. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want you to think that I was dismissing any of those points, but...
No, totally. Well, okay, so here's the other cool thing about GDC. There's lost levels that happens at GDC.
Oh, God, yeah.
Which you don't need a badge for. So here's the thing with GDC. You don't need to get a badge to get shit done.
Yup.
If anything, a badge is more like cumbersome than anything else. Okay, so here's a couple tricks for GDC, because you hear all the time, go to GDC, go to GDC. Stay at the indie hostel.
Yeah.
Have a buddy with you at all times, wherever you go. I'm from the Bay Area. I lived in San Francisco for a very, very long time. And so when I hear people talk about how dangerous it is, I'm always like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's totally fine. But that's also coming from the local perspective where I know where to go and where not to go. So it's a little bit unfair for me to say that.
Hi,
so
my name's Will, and I Googled a pizza place and walked many, many blocks into the heart of the Tenderloin as a very pale Englishman.
Yeah, I love the Tenderloin.
I wasn't prepared.
It can be scary, which is totally fine. And that honestly is just like have a buddy in a city where you've never been before, regardless. Just always have a buddy, right? That's just general good advice. So don't get a badge. Yeah. I mean, if you can get one, that's fine. Like, I'm not saying don't.
You know what? For almost every GDC I've been to, all I've gotten is a con pass. So just being able to walk the floors.
Exactly. I've only done expo badges. So next year will be my 10th GDC. I have never been to a GDC talk.
I was supporting a GDC talk, and I think that's the only one of... Oh, no. I did go to a talk this year. I went to Sammy from Bluehole's talk about community engagement for building a product around PUBG. Which, it was basically just validation, because Sammy's community campaign was basically shit that I'd sorry, it's me. This is the problem. I get into industry talk and I start swearing a lot more. But it was a similar campaign I'd pitched in previous roles. And so for me, it was just vindication. It was like, in your face, people who said my campaign wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I just...
That's the way to do it.
Walk the halls, talk to everybody, hang out.
Well, and let's say that you aren't able to get a badge and you're like, but I still want to make the best of my GDC experience. Okay, so there's this beautiful garden right behind the convention center called the Yerba Buena Gardens. Yep. That's where all the indies hang out all day long. That's where everybody hangs out. That is going to be completely worth your time. Maybe not from a business perspective, but from a meeting people in the industry perspective, which can be extremely invaluable in the long run. Like, do it. Go to lost levels. Just ask people. Here's the other thing that I find in our industry. There's a lot of gatekeeping. And I hate gatekeeping so much. Yeah. It really, really irritates me. And what I mean by gatekeeping is this idea that, like, people make you feel like if you ask a question that you're stupid for asking that question. Never, ever feel that way, because every single one of us started somewhere. So ask people, I've heard about this lost levels thing. What is it? And if someone's like, oh, you don't know what lost levels is? Move on. Not worth your time. Because the people that you want to be talking to are the people that are like, oh my God, I'm so excited about lost levels. I'm so excited to tell you about it. It's like, you should come with me. You should check it out with me. Those are the people that you want to be talking to.
Very yes. Also, I'm going to say something. A lot of people who give you that patronizing, you don't know what X is, usually small fry and not worth your time. Like, those are the people I found that are just the time wasters. The people who are... One of the things I found is people who are super chill and, like, chatting things, with just about anybody. I will find out after GDC that this person is, like, a heckin' badass.
Yeah.
There's a real correlation between not an ass is really good at what they do. There's a correlation. There's a correlation.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, yeah. So that's kind of the thing. Like, also, make sure you go to GDC with a business card.
Oh, God, yes.
I'm shocked at how many people are like, oh, I just, like, don't have one. No, have one. They're cheap.
One of the fun things about going independent is that I get to design my own branding now. Well, commission my own branding. So for PAX this year, we ripped off the Cornetto Trilogy box art. So I had a little Shaun of the Dead style business cards.
Oh, right. I have your business card. I thought that was super cool.
It's so good. Okay. Because I could do GDC stories to the break of day.
I know, I hear you.
One of the great things about GDC is it gives you a shaky hands access to the kind of people who are going to find you funding. Now, one of the things that we came back to earlier, which I don't know if I threw at you as a question, I think, because it was pre-introversion, was that for a time, there was a conventional wisdom for video game Kickstarters that was to use the campaign to demonstrate an audience to get partial funding and to seek funding elsewhere to cover the costs. How true is that? And is it still true now? Is using Kickstarter to generate interest in like publishers or external funding still valid?
It is still valid. So the cool thing about Kickstarter funding is that it's not just like a one size fits all. So there's a handful of different reasons why people come to Kickstarter. They come to Kickstarter either to like complete their funding. So it's like the last 10, 20, 30%, whatever it is. They come to Kickstarter for like marketing purposes, which is like, we just want people to kind of learn about this game, which is fine, but there's some challenges with that in terms of messaging of it. And so that's a conversation where I would rather have a one-on-one with someone about that, because I want to make sure that the messaging is okay and it's different for each project. We also see people come to Kickstarter to fund or like to generate awareness for a publisher potentially. Again, these are all completely fine as long as you're saying, we need X amount of money to finish the game, whatever that means, you're generally going to be fine. But again, that would be a conversation that you would want to have with me to make sure that we message it correctly.
Yeah. And there was some GDC talk about the cost of it. Yeah, it ain't cheap, but... And one of the points that you were saying earlier on GDC, and the reason why I wanted to have that funding question is that if you are considering a Kickstarter, or if you have one, that can be a very good point to have that conversation with publishers. Having a successful Kickstarter puts you on a much stronger footing than having a failed Kickstarter in terms of discussion. And
that's not true.
Oh, yay! Please, if that is not the case, then that is wonderful. If you'd like to give us some details on that.
Yeah. So this kind of goes into earlier in our conversation with the idea that there is no such thing as a failed Kickstarter.
Okay.
What I mean by that is there are Kickstarters that don't fund. The only time you failed on Kickstarter is if you've run a project and you've learned nothing. If you've run a project and you've come to me and you're like, I didn't learn anything, that's a failed Kickstarter to me. But if you come to Kickstarter and you don't fund your first time around, that's completely okay, because we've seen publishers actually come to Kickstarter to find projects that haven't funded, to swoop them up before they end up like blowing up before they relaunch. Because a lot of times what will happen is people will relaunch and they've already built that community.
Yeah.
They just haven't built their community large enough to fund their first time around. So then they continue to build that community, and then they kind of have a bit of an upper hand sometimes with publishers.
Okay, because they have more of an initial interest. They can be like, well, this is the strength of our community. This is what we can bring to bear. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
And delicious, delicious numbers.
Yeah.
We touched on it earlier, but metrics are so powerful. And yeah, I don't know a better way to say it. Metrics equals good money's like.
Yeah. Well, here's the cool thing. So we have all of our numbers on Kickstarter. And they're updated every single day. If you go to Kickstarter.com, there's let me pull it up so I can find exactly what it is. But we have all of our daily stats, basically. If you go to Kickstarter.com, scroll all the way down, under the About section, there's a stats link that you can click on. and all of our stats are there
Okay,
under every single category.
I might actually be able to show. Stats! Aha! Alrighty. I'll just drop this into chat so everyone else can have a look. I'm not going to bring it up on main screen because I am left-handed juggling this a little bit. But this is fascinating. So that is a very large number of total dollars.
It's a lot of money. Yeah.
It's a lot of money. This is one of those points where I'm trying to count the commas to work out how much in total. So, no big deal, no big deal.
It's a wild amount of money. I see a question here.
Please, go for it.
Has there been issues with people causing trouble with the Kickstarter system? Things like chargebacks or fraud disputes. How does Kickstarter handle things if there is? So everything is managed by an internal team, our trust and safety team, if there are any issues with like chargebacks and any sort of fraud disputes.
Yeah.
Which is not uncommon, but not super common at the same time.
Okay.
So, just as, what is it? Just a small 3.9 billion. Yeah.
Not 2.1.
Yeah. So every single case of chargebacks or potential fraud is individually managed by our trust and safety team. We take that stuff very, very seriously. We like to hear from the creator. We like to hear from the backer if there is any sort of issue. If you're talking about something like taking the money and run, that's a little bit of a different discussion, and all of that information I would actually point to the website to look at. Yeah. But in the case of like a chargeback or a fraud dispute between a backer and a creator, we take that very, very seriously, and we have a team in place.
Way cool. No, that's way cool. Sorry, the Prolo was joking about a thing. We played a wonderful indie game called Else Heartbreak earlier in the year, and I kind of accidentally got myself into $2.1 billion in debt playing that game. So,
Oh no!
I just wanted to be the best soda salesman in the world.
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I think we all want to be the best soda salesman in the world.
In our heart of hearts. That's also the same game where I failed to compile a baguette, so it turned red and burst into flames.
That's incredible.
Also, yeah, if complete tangent, video game soundtracks, I can't recommend Else.Heartbreak enough. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. You know what's funny, actually, is there's a whole, like, separate community on Kickstarter for video game soundtracks in terms of, like, LP pressings, making an actual record.
Yeah, and some of them look gorgeous.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm always fascinated by that stuff.
And I mean, like, I could get into this, because a lot of the physicalities of merch like that has always been something that's too expensive for a company to undertake, because you've got to front load the cost, which is because for physical productions it's always tricky. But in these respects, like, you can do it. You can do physical editions. One of the things we've seen with like gamers editions and other stuff is people taking existing products, doing a physical boxed copy run for them, and then working out via crowdfunding like how many units they're making. And if they equate the tiers to the content of the boxes, then they have a sensible model. In my humble opinion.
100%. Yeah. So that's actually, that brings up a really interesting point, which is physical rewards for Kickstarter projects for a digital game. So things like t-shirts, stickers, keychains, stuff like that as a reward for a video game. So we try to discourage that only because the shipping for physical rewards is astronomical, especially if you're like, well, I'll just ship to anywhere in the world. It costs a lot of money for someone in the US to ship to like New Zealand, for example.
Oh, feckin' yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. So we try to encourage people not to do that unless you have a deal in place with something like IndieBox, for example, that can kind of handle massive runs like that. But typically we just say it's not worth it, especially if you're like, okay, so here's a good example.
Yeah.
I just need $5,000 to finish my game, and then everybody gets a t-shirt. That $5,000, it's a wash. It's gone. Just for shipping alone, easily.
It's goodbye chunk of money.
Yeah.
The other thing that we learned from speaking with other creative teams is, as tempting as it is, like, take into consideration anything that involves direct user feedback. And I know you know this. I just wanted to say it for kind of the sanctity of the stream. If you say, if you give me, $300, I'll let you design a sword. That is not a zero cost. The amount of back and forth required to create that asset can end up costing you more than that $300.
Yep. Well, and not just the time, but also like if you need to hire a second artist in order to fulfill, any sort of like secondary creations or custom content, that itself is a crazy amount of money.
Yeah. And I know the team behind Path of Exile, thank you, my brain, have talked about it quite a lot, because it's important to discuss. Like, a person's time is not free. Even if you're an indie, in fact, more so if you're an indie, the funds that you get from Kickstarter are what are essentially paying you to live for as long as it takes you to get this game out the door, and then hopefully a bit after. So.
Yeah. Oh, so what would be your recommendation on this sort of pledge tiers for a digital product? What have seen the most success? That's a great question. So typically we recommend 5 to 7 different reward tiers.
Yeah.
So $1 reward is like a $1 to $2 reward. Basically, is just to get the updates, because you can do backer only updates. So like not everyone can see your updates. So people are essentially just like subscribing to your project.
Yeah.
For something like $5, I don't know, something small, like they get like a digital art book or digital wallpaper, something like that. And then get into the $15, $20. $15 to $20 is typically where you're going to offer the game.
Yeah.
12 to 15 is like an early bird. So like the first, 500 backers receive the game at a discounted price. And then once that's gone, once those first 500 people back the project at $12 to $15, then everybody else backs the game at like $20 to $25. And that's going to be essentially the base reward for the game. Okay. And then you can get into kind of some of the fun stuff. And so that's like for $50, you get 2 copies of the game. For $200, you get 4 copies of the game and a full digital art book and a wallpaper, something like that. Yeah. Once we get into the sort of the higher level tiers, that's where you can do something like a custom content. So maybe for $500, you get to help design a level, or for $500, you get to be in the game, whatever it is. Yeah. But there's a ton of different things that you can do there.
I would stipulate, and again, this is more for viewers than for your good self. But for any of that, work out the art pipeline before you do it. If you're going to put a person in the game, then have a process. They provide you a picture. You create it, you deliver it. If there's going to be a back and forth of any of that, then maybe choose a different kind of asset that you're going to give them.
Yeah, you can also stipulate, like, we are willing to do 2 rounds of feedback.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that.
And that's up to you. Some people are like, I don't care, I'll do 10 rounds. It doesn't really bother me. Like, it's up to you and your team. You need to figure that out.
Yeah, but art pipeline on that one. Yeah, because when you know how long it takes, then you know how much it costs. And when you know how much it costs, then you're bad and with numbers. Delicious numbers.
I also am a big fan of numbers. I'm not great at them, but I do like them.
I am very lucky because one of my co-workers that I jammed with back at CA, he was very into the metrics breakdown of kind of like user interaction stuff to work out what people really liked and the stuff that they weren't telling you that they liked. And that's pretty cool. When you can... Oh, God. Why is everything... fucking Windows being an ass. When you can work out what people really want, then you have much more of an understanding of what you need to deliver. Because, and I say this with love, most users don't know what they want. And and I don't mean that they look at a Kickstarter and say, oh, I like that, and that they're wrong. It's that if you stood up in a room and went, I want to make a game, what should I make? Yeah. You're going to have a bad time. People are only going to be able to give you information on the games that they already know and already like. People didn't know they needed Undertale, and then Undertale came out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Again, more for chat than for anything, but yeah.
No, totally. I see a great question that just came in.
Oh, get stuck in.
How much are people pledging at those super high tiers for the reward versus just for the sake of supporting the project? That is a great question, and it does vary from project to project. However, one of the reasons we do tell people to have a wide range of rewards at different reward tiers is because people do pledge at those high tiers. There's also a cool function on Kickstarter where you can back at any number that you want up to $10,000. So let's say that someone's like, there's a $50 reward tier and there's a $150 reward tier, but someone's like, I just want to give you $70 because I have it and I don't want any rewards. That's an option, and people do that. It's fascinating. A lot of the times people that are backing at some of the higher reward tiers, so we're talking $500 plus, it's because there's customized special content that's available there that isn't available if you just were to like buy the game on Steam. And so that is something where it's like the customized content, and people will back at those numbers. I'm not saying it happens in every project, and I'm not saying that you'll have massive amounts of people, but having the option there for people is super important.
That is fascinating. I wish I had more like personal data on it. The only example that I can give was buying pre-release content from MechWarrior Online, because they were releasing this one giant robot that I'm absolutely besotted with. And if you got it, you got like 3 variants and a cheeky little badge next to your name. And I'm like, done. Yeah, give me money.
Well, here's the other side of it too, is you can ask this is why it's important to have a community, is you can ask your community like, hey, what do you all want? Right? Like your community is going to kind of tell you, like, you can ask them, would you back this reward tier if you could be a part of the game? Yeah. Would you back this reward tier if it was like a custom badge? And that's kind of that's one of the best things that you could possibly do. Like, because you could say like, oh, I know my community would love this. I know my community would love this. And let's say you pose that question, and let's say they say no.
Yes.
The other side of the positive part of people saying no is they're going to tell you what they do want.
Yeah.
So you can kind of like shoehorn that into your project in any way that you find fitting. And you also have the option to say like, hey everyone, thank you so much. I love your feedback. I'm not able to do it. What if I did this? And the other advantage of doing something like that is your community then feels heard, and they say, hey, this person is willing to listen to us. We're going to advocate for them even harder.
And that's awesome. Anything that drives engagement is gorgeous, and things that give people a badge of honor or a mark to say, I supported this, are always going to go down a storm.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that was really interesting with chatting with the Chucklefish peeps is that when they ran their Kickstarter, I think it was Kickstarter they ran, or is it in-house? Feck, I'd have to go look it up. The point is that they offered backing rewards either via your services or via their own, which gave you like forum icons and things like that, which denoted your the level at which you had supported the project. And there were people upgrading through the tiers. And that was something that I hadn't considered, that someone might initially do X, but then they become more enamored with the project, so they bump it up to Y. And that's not something I'd considered. So one of the other things that I've been hearing a lot of, if we've still got your time, if you need to bail, please let us know, because I'm a waffle man,
totally
so I can keep going.
I'm just checking in to see what's going on, because there's a person that just walked by that suspiciously looked like a tabletop person. So
dun dun dun.
There's this really funny. It's like a uniform. Sometimes when people that are into metal and RPGs, they all look exactly the same, and I love it so much. It's the best thing.
there is a look. I mean, says me, feckin' grungy jeans and t-shirt. Like, I feckin' look like a indie Mother Hubbard, so there is no mistaking where I'm from.
I never know what. I mean, that's a whole like sort of fascinating conversation too. But I'm always like, I wonder when people see me and I tell them what I do, I wonder what they think in terms of like what types of games I like. It's just, I don't know, it's so interesting.
That's an interesting
Because I think people would look at me and they would assume that I'm just like, I just play like cute mobile games, but I'm like, oh my god, I'm obsessed with Bastion. Like
there's another Will in chat. So what, ho friend? Hello.
She likes Farmville. Rude. No, I'm kidding.
To be honest, I didn't get any non-gamery vibes from your good self when we met. The ones that set my teeth on edge are the LA types, who clearly maybe play a Madden once in a while and want to lecture me about stuff. And that's the one where, like, the smile is there. I'm like, oh, yes, but one of my eyes is just fecking going, like, I wish you would feck off.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I wanted to throw one more stodgy question in before we leave, before we lose your good time. I've heard a lot of discussions in recent months about the sensibility of stretch goals.
Yes.
Stretch goals have been the doom of some individuals.
They have indeed. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, just stretch goals. Let's get in there. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
What are your advice and your avoids?
Yes. So the first thing to keep in mind is you never want to actually launch with any stretch goals. A live Kickstarter project that has not met their funding goal should have no stretch goals on it, and I cannot stress that enough. Now, the thing with stretch goals is stretch goals are very unique to Kickstarter in the sense that Kickstarter created stretch goals. And I think the best way to look at stretch goals is that a stretch goal in a Kickstarter project should be something that is like, if you could pie in the sky, anything that you could do, you put that into the stretch goal at a reasonable price. So for example, if you say, our first stretch goal is we want to be on Switch and we've had no conversation with Nintendo. So don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Porting games is not free, and it can be very... And here's the thing. The kind of people that will back for those specific sort of things will care a lot if you don't deliver.
Exactly. So you want to look at your stretch goals like you would the rest of your Kickstarter project. So if you also, like, unless you're close to it, don't ever roll out $1 million stretch goal, even if you've met your funding goal. Unless you're like, we've made $800,000 and it looks like we're going to make $1 million, then you can roll out that $1 million stretch goal. But like, it people are going to look at that and be like, all right, that's a little silly. I hate to say that, but it's true.
No, I think it's one of those conversations that's very important to say, because if we don't talk about them, then people will fall foul of them.
Yeah. So I think the trick with the stretch goals is basically like, okay, so let's say that $50,000 is your goal and your first stretch goal is like $75K. And maybe that's something where you're like, I know I can update the graphics. I know that I can update my art for that stretch goal. That's a great stretch goal. That is an amazing stretch goal. Let's say that an example of not a good stretch goal is, okay, $50,000, we've met that stretch goal, and at $75K, I'm going to go to a conference and I'm going to shave my head. Why?
Okay, but why though?
Yeah, okay, but why though? So a great example of a project to look at that has amazing stretch goals, Boyfriend Dungeon.
Yeah, which gives us an excuse to plug Boyfriend Dungeon again, because why the hecking heck not? I'm so stoked for that game.
I love them so much. So I think one of the reasons their stretch goals are great is that they not only respond to the needs of the community and what it is they know their community wants because they've asked their community.
Yeah.
They also have stretch goals that are associated with the game. The number of times I've seen stretch goals rolled out where they're just like, I don't know, I'm going to do some weird, silly thing. It's like, what does that have to do with the project? So make sure that it's associated with the projects. And the third thing that's really great about their stretch goals is that they're reasonable stretch goals.
Yes.
So I would say they are the pillar of how you should be rolling out stretch goals.
Indeed.
If it is something where it is like a physical reward of some kind, like I think one of their stretch goals was that body pillow.
Of course.
They taste tested bubble tea because it was in line with what it was they were doing. It was in line with the studio.
Yes.
So that's why they did the bubble tea. And they also did it on Twitch as a way to promote the Kickstarter project.
Yeah. It's also worth saying that, like, if your project or your studio or your personalities has a specific brand. I mean, you were talking about, like, the board game metal. Like, if your project is incredibly metal, if you are going to be doing a song about the metals, then, like, if we reach this goal, you know, one of our developers is going to play, you know, a song from the soundtrack live in a venue, or something that has a thematic hook. I have seen has worked. Actually, that was a horrible idea because it involved a venue and music and another thing. I can't think of a great example off the top of my head because
I have one.
Go for it.
Okay, you could do a Skype call with the creator and talk about metal for 30 minutes.
Ooh. And that's real cool. That's deliverable. We know the costs on that. We know what it's going to take. Like, that's super cool.
That again is customized content. That's
Yes.
a special thing that you're not going to get if you just were to buy the game on Steam or download it onto your Xbox or something like that.
And that's super cool. If we've still got your time for a little bit, do you mind if I leave you with these lovely folks to chat to? Because I desperately need another cup of tea. I am keeling over here.
Yeah, sure. I could probably do like another 10 minutes.
Then let's chat with you for 10 minutes, and then because I'll call a break, and we're currently playing through Pillars of Eternity 2 at the moment, which I believe was I know Pillars 1 was a Kickstarter big success. Was
Yeah.
2? Was Pillars 2 a Kickstarter?
I think it might have been on Fig, but I'm not sure. I think it was on Fig.
Traitors!
It's okay.
No. And I think Fig's an interesting conversation because it's not only asking does like crowdfunding in the sense of do users want to back this project and give it their time and their money, but do people want to invest in it from a professional business standpoint? And that's a really interesting conversation. Yeah, they did Fig.
That's okay. Yeah, it's just a different business model. It's totally fine.
But I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is that projects that fail on Fig do not have a good time. Now, this is all observational, and I'm happy to be wrong on this one, but as I've observed it, like, you can fail on Kickstarter through being naive or just not hitting the right beats, not explaining your project properly. We've seen projects relaunch and succeed, but in Fig, it's like not only did the users not see that there was something viable, but investors did not see there was something viable. And that stings.
I think you're also not allowed to relaunch on Fig.
Shit.
I think the way that their business model is done, and I could be very wrong, and I apologize if that is the case, but I think it's a one and done situation.
Yeah. Which absolutely helps for projects that have an existing user base, but for those that don't, they're going to have a very bad time. And
I think it's just the pressure's a little bit higher. And I mean, that's, it's a different platform, so it's hard to do sort of like a one-to-one analysis, at least for me. But like, that's kind of one of the coolest things about Kickstarter is you can not fund your first time around, but the advantage of not funding your first time around is, number one, you're going to learn a hell of a lot.
Yep.
Number two, you are very much you're going to have a community of, like, let's say that you needed, I don't know, just number wise, let's say that you needed 600 people to reach your goal, but let's say you got 400. That's 400 people that you didn't have to begin with. Maybe.
Yep. And the one that I'd like to draw attention to is the one you mentioned earlier, which is The Good Life, which did not make its Fig goals, but did carry over onto Kickstarter, and it was able to bring it to life, because that was a game people wanted, that people cared about, yo.
I didn't hear what the game was. I'm sorry. Say that again.
Oh, no, The Good Life.
Oh, Sweary, yeah.
Yeah. What did I say? Did I say Suda?
Oh, did you? I didn't even hear it.
I might have said the wrong person, so I do apologise,
okay.
one and all. But yes, The Good
Go
Life...
get your tea.
You know what? Tea's a really good idea.
Go get your tea. I know that's what you need. I'm happy to chat with our friends.
Yay! Thank you kindly, as I desperately need a cuppa. And I got this cute little BRB needs tea banner. Check that mother hubbard out. Okay, so I'll be back with you in a second. If you have any questions for our stupendous guest, cook them up, brew them, serve them hot and fresh, lest they go stale in the oven. And I'll be back with you momentarily.
Awesome. All right, I'm
gonna go get me tea.
I'm gonna scroll through some of these questions. Let's see. What weapon looks like your favorite in Boyfriend Dungeon? Oh, I don't know. I can't answer that. What was your favorite stretch goal? My favorite stretch goal actually wasn't a video game. It was through Trogdor. They had like different meeples, and they wanted to roll out additional meeples and characters. And I thought that was so cool, just in terms of like completing that wild Homestar Runner universe. I thought that was really cool. With Kickstarter, if your campaign fails, backers get refunded, right? No. So with Kickstarter, if your campaign doesn't fund, There is no exchange of money, so there is no refund because there is no charge of any sort of credit cards. So cards are only charged on Kickstarter if you fund. And somebody answered that. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Rhymes with moose? Yes. What was your favorite? Oh, I answered that. I think, yeah. Will is just trying to tempt us into asking those food-based Kickstarter questions that we all agreed to avoid. Oh my gosh. Well, can I ask you all some questions maybe? Oh wait. If considering a Kickstarter campaign for the purpose of raising numbers for publishers and such, what sort of development state are these projects usually in when successful? That's a really great question. So typically they are almost completed. So the answer is no, Moose. Okay. So they're typically like, there's about 10% left. I mean, everybody's development cycle is a little bit different, but they're definitely not like 100% complete. They're just like finishing touches need to happen. Slow Down You Kids has a great question. What is the best upcoming indie game and why is it Goose Game? So he asks that because every time I go to a conference and I come home, I'm obsessed with Untitled Goose Game. I just think it's the best game that has ever existed. It is my game of the year. I am just a joyful human every single time I play it. I force my friends to play it at cons. More than once, my lovely friend at Nintendo has gotten me into the Nintendo booth and we just play Goose Game. At least we did that at PAX. And I just think it's genius. I love it so much. I just love honking at the groundskeeper. Everything about it is just perfect. So I was going to ask you all, so my favorite holiday is coming up and that is Halloween. And I'm always curious to know what people are going to be for Halloween. Because the last couple of Halloweens, I haven't been able to dress up, which makes me really sad because my band plays shows on Halloween. And so we all kind of have to dress alike, which is like scary ghost band. But I'm always curious to know what people are going to be. I'm going to be a game developer for Halloween. I see what you did there. My kid is going to dress as the Pirate Queen. That's awesome. I think my favorite Halloween costume I ever did was one year I dressed up as Michael Jackson from Thriller when he turns into the zombie. That was like a really interesting makeup challenge. Ask Will about the Pirate Queen. Okay, I'll absolutely ask him about the Pirate Queen. Skeleton's on skeleton. Okay, cool. This is interesting. I've never just like sat on camera with a Twitch chat before. It's kind of scary and weird because there's a delay. I don't think I'm very good at this, but that's okay. I will be that guy who doesn't do anything for Halloween. Yeah, that's totally fair. I think before my husband started dating me, so long ago, he wasn't really into Halloween either, and I kind of like forced him into it. I don't know how much of that he does like for me because I love it so much versus just like he's also himself kind of gotten into it, but I am weirdly obsessed with Halloween. I think if I didn't work in games and had to do cons from like a professional level, I could see myself getting like deep into cosplay, into some like weird cosplay, but it's probably better for me to not do that because all my time and money and resources would go to it.
Oh, I'm sorry for making you wait. I finally got my tea.
I'm gonna assume you're back again. There is a delay, so.
And I have returned.
Yay!
You know what?
Oh, you have a different cup.
No. Well, I have a different.
Oh no, sorry. I was seeing your cast, and I thought your cast was a cup.
No, but if I could build like a flask into this, so I could just. That would be the pro move right there.
Oh.
Next week I'm having my. Next week I'm either going to have a new, more functional cast or my hand recreated by science. So I'm kind of waiting on that one. So I'm going to ask if they can like install maybe like a USB charger into it. Just wrap it around with the rest.
Ooh, like cyborg status. I like that.
Okay, I know it's completely not related to anything else we've spoken about, but one of my favourite things that I've been seeing as a trend in... Oh, I'm sitting on my phone. In video games, at least last couple of years, was marketing teams doing, like, spends for good. The prosthetic limb, which was a reworking of Big Boss's arm from Metal Gear Solid 5, which was paid for out of the marketing budget for this guy who needed a prosthetic arm. So...
Oh.
I know it was kind of a random thing to throw in there, but it's been on my mind a lot, so I just wanted to add it.
Yeah, no. So, you know, it's interesting. This is like totally random side tangent. And then
Please. I live in side tangent.
Well, and then after that, I think I do have to get out of this room. But I went to a conference probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And of course, I don't remember the name of the developer and I don't remember the name of the game. But he had a horrible motorcycle accident, and he's essentially quadriplegic, and he had some sort of he like snapped his neck, and so he had no mobility. All of his just completely quadriplegic, and so the only finger he could move was his pinky.
Yeah.
And he built a game by just using his pinky to code, and he built a very small game. But I thought that was like one of the most just sort of like anytime I'm like, ugh, I can't do anything and I suck at everything and bad at my job. You know, we all go through that and it's totally fine. It's totally normal.
Yeah.
I like have that in the back of my mind. I'm like, this guy would literally pass out to the point where his wife needed to sit with him every single hour of the day because if he passed out, he would stop breathing and she would have to hold his neck up for him to just like kind of wait until he would have to wake up. And he coded and made a video game.
Yeah.
What am I doing with my life?
Yup. Like, holy crud in a handbag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I leave you on that inspirational note.
No, what a splendid... you know what? This is a lovely time to call it. So, Anya, thank you so much for coming in today. And thank you for making time. I know it's been a bit crazy and hectic for us all, but I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I feel so honored to be a part of this, and thank you everyone in chat for being so kind. I really appreciate it.
I was totally not overexcited and stoked to have you on. I was all like chill and like, whatever, you know, just got, someone from Kickstarter on, it's no big deal.
I am, once you learn, I am just a really weird nerd who loves music and games. I'm not that exciting.
That's the secret. Everyone in the games industry is a weird nerd.
We really are. Yeah.
So, thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm just going to post your Twitter once more. If any of you had any more legit questions about video game Kickstarters, about things you wanted more information in, please use the powers given to you by this Twitter.
Yes. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to chat with anybody.
Right. Once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Right. Well, now I've got to start pushing buttons. I'm right sorry.
All right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna hang up.
Okay, into the thing. All right.
Okay, bye everybody.
Okay, bye. Why have my buttons disappeared? There we go. Oh, now they're back as soon as I leave. Brilliant. Right, you lovely, lovely folks. I hope you enjoyed that. That was ruddy marvellous, that. That was ruddy marvellous. I'm still just mentally unpacking a whole bunch of stonkingly... Oh, T-burps. Oh, there are the T-burps. It wouldn't be a day without them, would it? I'm still unpacking a lot of the incredible info that we got from that. Like, we got pretty in-depth there, so... Yeah. Everyone's asking, so